Your funding ratio of assets to liabilities is right at 88.2%. If you go to a 2-to-1 plan change, keep all the benefits in place, your unfunded liability increases to a little over $3.5 million. Amortize over a 25-year schedule, closed schedule, your funding ratio decreases to about 81%.
See, this is the thing I'm fearful of. We sat here in '08 and '09 and saw the economy virtually collapse. And our unfunded liabilities, the state ran way short. And they gave us a huge bill we had to pay to make it up. All cities did. I forget what it was. But
You're talking about the first actuarial methodology change.
And this seems to assume a stable economy.
Well,
I just worry about recessions have been outlawed. And we have $22 trillion of debt in the national government, excluding the several trillion dollars in unfunded student loan liability.
yeah, and that's a big concern on the federal side, but TMRS is a different operation, okay? We are not state funded. We don't get any state appropriations.
But
We don't get a
you're
nickel
increasing our liability.
if you make the plan
If we
change
make the
to go
plan
to
change.
2-to-1.
A huge increase of our liability.
Sure, absolutely, because you're improving the plan benefits for your employees, no doubt.
Mr.
5 years.
5 years.
Mr. Rodriguez, may I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Can you explain the difference between Plan 3 and Plan 4?
Yeah.
What, early
The,
vesting?
the question is, if you look at Plan 3 compared to Plan 4, it's a 6-2-to-1 plan, but removing the transfer element of the updated service credits. What the transfer element does is actually update employees' accounts that come to work for you from other cities. You recruit a police chief to come work, I'm just using that as an example, that you could to come work for you. The transfer element of the updates will actually update their previous TMRS account to more reflect their present salary level. Okay? And you have 19 employees that you brought from other cities that you recruited or retained to come over here. So that's a big piece in cost in that transfer piece. If you remove it, that rate goes to 12.32% of payroll, which is a little above what you're paying now, 11.75. Yes, sir.
Is the plan as far as the years of vesting set in stone, or is that, can that be
No, 5-year vesting is set in stone. We actually implemented a change in 2009 to reduce our vesting requirement from 10 years to 5 years. Okay, let's talk about vesting. You were getting confused here, okay? Fully vested is not like a 401k. Once you're vested with the city, 2 things occur. You earn a right to a pension. Doesn't mean you got the match. You got to retire to receive the match. If you leave your company, you take your 401k with you. In public industry, you have to retire to receive the match. Absolutely, because if you have employees that refund and pull their money out, it becomes an actuarial gain for you. I'm not telling you to get rid of employees or anything like that, but I'm telling you it just becomes an actuarial gain. And some of my cities have difficulty with recruitment and retention. It stays as an asset that earns interest and increases your funding ratio that much quicker. We cannot send it to you to fix your street, Mayor. We can't do it. It's there specifically. It is there specifically for it's specifically there for the pension benefits. Okay. So it actually lowers your liability. It lowers your cost that you have to pay towards pension benefits. It becomes an actuarial asset immediately. Okay.
Does the current plan at Castle Hills preclude employees from opening their own IRA, SEP IRA, or any type of IRA program?
Individual employees, as a city, you can actually have a deferred compensation type plan, which is similar to a 401k that private industry provides. So individual employees on their own could put more money away for retirement, sure.
But can they open their own separate IRA regardless of what the city does?
No.
They can't? Are you
No.
sure?
Once an employee, well, they can do anything on their own. I'm
That's
talking
what
about
I- that's what
individual
I'm a-
IRA.
That's what I'm asking.
Oh,
On
they
their
can do
own.
whatever they want.
So they can start funding their own SEP IRA or regular IRA or?
They can do whatever they want. But
Okay.
let's
There will
talk
be
about,
limits.
well, wait a minute. Let's talk about how it works under TMRS. Once you have a full-time employee on the payroll, you hire a full-time employee, they're immediately in this pension plan.
Right.
It is automatic enrollment. If an individual employee on their own wants to do IRAs, Roth IRAs, traditional IRAs, conduit IRAs, whatever they want to do, they can do whatever they want, okay? As long as they meet the IRS limits, because there's IRS limits of what you can put away. 18.5, there's other Roth IRA limits. So there's always limits. But individual employees can do whatever they want. No big deal. They can always supplement what they have in TMRS. And what cities do for employees is they allow employees to have a 457 type provider. And that provider would allow employees through payroll deduction to put money away like a 401k or an IRA. And they determine the investment structure, they put the money away, there are IRS limits of what you can put away, but they can do that on their own, no problem. Okay.
If you don't mind, I have a few more questions. I'm very curious about several things here. Do you deal in annuities? Are annuities part of the investments that you're talking about?
No.
What are the investments you're talking about?
As
So
far
you
as what we,
that throw off this interest, what are they primarily? The government obligations?
right now, we're about, and we are diversifying the portfolio. I'd have to go back and look. We have a board meeting next week. We're right at about a 65-35 split. 65% equities, about 35% fixed income. And equities encompass both domestic, international, corporate, real estate. We have a lot of pieces.
Was this policy in place in 08, 9, and 10?
No, it was not.
Is there any, what's the limitation, if any, on the investment entities you use?
As far as what we invest in or the
Where and
percentage
what?
of the portfolio?
Where and what? Because you have all degrees of investments.
Correct.
You can go, do you use any options?
Right.
I mean, some plans have option programs.
Well, we do have a strict investment policy of what we can invest in, quote unquote, funds, real estate funds, REITs, whatever it might be. It's a very, very strict policy determined by our board and our economic advisors.
So you can invest in REITs.
Sure, we have some pieces. We don't have a big piece, but we do have some pieces, sure, in real estate.
I can only say one thing about REITs. And it's a personal thing, my family. REITs, for a long time, people liked so much until the 1970s came around. And then almost all of them collapsed. And I had one relative who lost just about everything he had. Now, REITs are very popular today, but
Well, it's not a big portion of our portfolio, but it is a small piece
Like any type
of
of
our real
investment
estate.
portfolio, it'd be like a pimple on your arm.
okay.
That's it.
Well, at this moment, that's what I have.
Okay,
for
I
right
need to
now.
go back to the 6-2-1 plan, and city manager wanted me to cover this. That proposed plan to go to 6% 2-to-1 match. Talked about the rate about right at 13.48% of payroll, increase of right at about $67,000 a year. This is written in our TMRS statute. If a city reduces the employee contribution level, we allow 3 levels under our statute, 5, 6, and 7%, okay? If you reduce it and choose that plan structure, we require a 2/3 approval of the employees. Okay? It is written in our statute for that reason because our police and fire associations wanted the prevention of reduction of benefits. And that happened way before I started in the system 20 years ago. So it does require a 2/3 recorded vote. And I'll go back and check the statute, and I'll provide you whatever you want. That vote has to be recorded in some way, somehow, and provided to us and documented to us. Okay?
And you said if council were to approve going down that road, that TMRS would send a representative out here to sit down with each employee that wanted to meet with them
I'll
and
come
explain
back out
what it-
here if you want to. We'll meet with the employees, do the employee meetings. We'll look at their numbers, whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. We can cover everything for them.
So to explain the rationale behind it from my perspective, and I talked a little bit with the senior staff this morning about it, if you go to a 2-to-1 with a 6% match, they're roughly equivalent. It's, 18% versus 17.5% that's going into some type of a retirement account. But the employee winds up with a little more money in their pocket at the end of the month, and a 0.5% higher investment for the month. So I saw it as, rather than going strictly to a 2-to-1 at the 7%, it's kind of the middle ground between that and where we're at now. And as Mr. Rodriguez pointed out, we're one of a few cities in this surrounding area that has a 1.5-to-1, and it creates some problems for us with recruiting, and we've seen that with our police department. We've had a vacancy in the police department since I arrived here and have been recruiting very hard. And they teach a class on TMRS at the police academy now, and the first thing out of the applicant's mouth is, what's your matching ratio with TMRS? So it's really, it puts us in an unfavorable position when we're one of about 4 cities in the greater metropolitan area of San Antonio. I think that includes Windcrest, us, Somerset, and one other, if you count Somerset as being from part of San Antonio. But it kind of puts us in an unfavorable position when it comes to the recruiting and retention side.
Of course, we are a landlocked city. We're not like Alamo Heights has their own water system. We're not like San Antonio, which has enormous growth. We're not like several places. Well, we're just not like a lot of cities in terms of our ability to grow substantially. Have never been.
Mr. Vanderwiley, I'm curious. This subject unto itself is time-consuming to make sure you understand all the ins and outs. Who brought it forward? Why are we doing it right at our budget time now? I realize that if you wanted to do it, if the city wanted to do it, we would need to do it before the budget if we wanted to do it this year. But why now and why not 2 months ago or 3 to better prepare the budget? If I'm just curious how this came forward now. Who brought it forward?
Because this is the time of the year that we're
Who
formulating the numbers. I brought it forward.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's the time of the year that we're formulating numbers. I've had, based on the recommendations of a number of the staff here and some other conversations with a few of the folks, other folks that are in the room here, thought it was the opportune time, actually, as we build the budget, to make this consideration. But I do understand, and I'm sensitive to Mr. Rodriguez's time. We can move on from this. This is just a budget workshop. This is being put forth in front of you. Mr. Rodriguez ran the numbers, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 to go to a 7% 2-to-1, and somewhere in the neighborhood of $70,000 to go to 2-to-1 at a 6% matching, which would require a 2/3 vote of the employees. So,
I just have 2 questions. Can you explain again the transfer USC? Because I see that what we basically have is alternatives. That's really what changes between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I'm not quite sure that I'm perfectly clear about.
The updated service credit is actually the defined benefit. I'm going to talk about real quickly a definition of what updated service credits is. Updated service credits actually update individual employees' accounts based on 2 specific scenarios through their career: plan changes and salary changes. You hire a police officer making $25,000 a year. I'm making it up. And he works for you for 20, 25 years. Gets promoted, salary changes, whatever it might be. And then his ending salary is $50,000 a year. Again, I'm making this up. Okay? The updated service credits will actually go back and update his pension to more reflect his final salary level. It's a credit that helps his annuity be more reflective of what he's making at the end of his career, not what he was making 20, 25 years ago. Okay? Obviously, these updates are only earned if that employee does what?
Stays.
Retires. Not get vested. They've got to retire to receive the benefit. If they quit and leave and refund their account, they lose everything that you provided them. Okay? The transfer element of the updates will actually look at your employees that came from other cities, that you recruited and retained or brought in over here. We'll look at their salary structure through that tenure, and will actually update it to more reflect their final salary level with this city. And typically, the employees who come to cities come for two reasons: for salary and for benefits. Typically what I've seen. Okay, it could be different here. I'm not quite sure of what you're looking at. But that's really what the transfer element does. You have a lot of employees here, 19 to be exact. I didn't know the exact number until you told me today when our actuary ran it for you, that have come from other cities, that you've brought in from other cities. Well, those employees left the money in the plan with those previous cities. You're not matching any of that money, but that recruitment came in, about 19 of them, that transfer element affects. Kind of makes sense? A little bit. That's really the defined benefit feature of our plan, because DB plans always take the highest paid 5 years of salary, not the lowest 5 years. That's really the defined benefit feature of our plan. It's pretty unique. Correct. You have that in place for your employees right now, yes, sir. Any other questions or concerns that I miss? I'll give you all business cards if you need to call me, and I'll send you anything you want, I promise. Investment icon, you want our full investment portfolio, I'll provide it, no big deal. I think I have enough. You want the full? I'll give it to you. It's a long document, but I'll give it to you. Is that plenty of them? Pass those around. Is that plenty of them? Anything else I need to talk about? Any questions or concerns? Anything I missed? I'll stay as long as you want. All right, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, brother. All right, brother. Good seeing you.
Anybody else want a card? Here, I'll give you one. Let me capture this. This may be something to bring up in our meetings where they're non-action, because there's a lot to cover here. 'Cause, you know, I don't know about you, but my mind automatically goes back to the 401k system, and this has nothing to do with that. It has to do what big companies like Cisco are doing, all these, and just to say that is, it's actually a money-making situation, especially in areas where people don't retire. Because they can build all of that up, and I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. What I'm saying is they can build all that up that we've matched, and if they don't retire, we get it all back. What kind of deal is that? Now, that was our money to begin with. There's no doubt about that. But to me, if I was an employee, I don't know about that. I'm fighting it right now with my company. I want to buy me out 100% because, you know, well, I retired. That's a different deal. But all I'm saying is, anyway, we probably need to talk about it in a lot more to make sure everybody understands and the employee understands what they're getting into. These guys that have been here 20 years, no problem. These guys that are coming on board, it's a cloak and dagger, I think. What do you think?
All I know, I talked with Jerry Riddle when he retired. When he told me how much he had amassed through 401k, for IRAs, 401ks, and this, with discipline, at 1.5 to 1, it would make your jaw drop on the floor. And
You don't have to tell me. I
it's
got one just like
discipline
him at home.
measure. I mean, I don't know why we would ever suggest somebody go from 7 to 6. That to me is like cutting your own throat. But he, what he did, and he told me what he did, all it required is discipline, and he did it for 20, and he amassed an enormous amount of money.
That's one thing to remember, council, when we're going into things like this. There are other things that we could get involved in as a city. Annuities. Douglas, right there, he knows. A type of insurance that we could, it's thinking out of the box, but heaven forbid we do that. Okay. Let's move on. Mr. Dover, I think. Chief. Mr. Chief Dover, I think you were up. You still awake? Well, something about that snoring. Oh, my nose is deaf. Anybody like this card? What happened to the market today? Was that your?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Council. A little nervous, my first time presenting a budget, so. You throw a big fire in front of me, no problems. You put this group, and I'm a little intimidated, I must admit. Yes, sir. So this is the budget as I prepared. I included our new mission statement that I had our guys go through and develop this after I came into office. With that, we have our core values as well as the vision of the department. I can read that if you like, or if the vision of the department: we strive to continue our training and wellness to better serve the residents and those we come in contact with. It is our goal to actively participate in our community, serve as role models, and to educate the public, to work effectively to provide service deemed excellent by our residents. Core values: integrity, leadership, discipline, and honor. To tell you a little bit about the department, the 19 personnel, including myself, 3 shift captains, 3 shift lieutenants, and 12 firefighters. We have 3 apparatus and 1 command vehicle. Command is a 2012 Chevrolet pickup. Rescue is a 2009 Ford F-450 with a rescue body that was transferred from the 1995 Rescue that was previously in service. Engine is a 2008 Pierce Quantum with a 1,200 GPM, 1,250 gallon per minute pump, 500 gallon tank, and ladder 109 is a 1998 E1 75-foot Quint, 1,250 gallon per minute pump, and a 500 gallon tank. To the right, these are our emergency responses. 2017 year to date, as of July 31st, we've made 567 emergency calls. And then the previous years, 2012 through 2016, staying fairly consistent. 2015 was actually the first year post Wedgwood fire, and as you can see, 2016, the run numbers did increase again. I'm proposing to increase our annual training budget, increase our equipment maintenance budget, replacement of the ladder truck, and replace the air conditioner or the HVAC system in the fire station. Equipment maintenance is something that we're seeing that is starting to climb a little bit as our apparatus age and some of the gas-powered equipment that we have is aging. I'm proposing a $2,000 increase to this for the year. As I am proposing here in just a little bit, and I'll talk more on replacing the ladder truck, if the city moves forward with that, we're going to look at probably a 9 to 12 month waiting period as the truck is built and before we can get it in service. So I'm asking for the increase to help keep up with potential repairs that I anticipate us needing to keep the truck in service, as well as aging power equipment such as saws, generators, and power equipment. Our rescue tools are due for service, as well as annual testing for the ladders, all the ground ladders and the aerial apparatus itself. This year we're actually due for our 5-year service test on the ladder truck itself. Training. This was a key topic as I interviewed for the chief's position that I really wanted to focus on coming into office. It's something that I feel is extremely important to the jobs that we do. It's an ever-changing world, and if we're not staying on top of the tactics, the strategies, and the different training, the different things that make our job do what we have to do, we're not helping anybody. We're hurting ourselves. Currently, in our training budget, our certification fees come out of there for the Texas Commission on Fire Protection, who's our governing body that certifies us as firefighters, as well as the Texas Department of State Health Services, who certify us as EMTs and paramedics. Currently, there's an $85 testing fee for each certification that you apply for. There's a $85 initial certification fee for that certification, as well as we have to renew our certifications every year at $85 per person for a total of $1,615 that comes out of our training budget to recertify all 19 firefighters. The Texas Department of State Health Services, the EMS recertification fees are staggered. We only recertify every 4 years. The fee for an EMT is $64. Fee for a paramedic is $141, and that's every 4 years. In addition to that, we are required to have continuing education hours for fire, for EMS, and then myself and the other arson investigator, we have to have them for our peace officer certification as well. And this comes out of our training budget. Typically for EMS, we do an online continuing education subscription. It costs right around $120, I believe, every 2 years per firefighter that comes out of there. What we're finding now is to get the better schools, the better training, the quality of schools, we're having to travel away from the San Antonio area. The Dallas Metroplex has become a hotbed for a lot of the training. When I attended the Texas Fire Chiefs Academy last year, one portion of it was in Austin. This year that was in Georgetown. the second half of it is in Garland, Texas, outside of Dallas. So there's the added expense of the travel as well as accommodations while they're there. For quality training, the prices are actually going up. We do a lot of training in-house, and you can see that by the picture up top. We try to stay sharp on our skills, but to get the better training, the better knowledge, the better information that we need, we typically have to bring in instructors from the outside. We try to take advantage of as much training as we can through TEACS, the Texas Engineering Extension Service, through Texas A&M. We have this year hosted roughly 6 to 8 classes since I took office, and that's all been free training that we tried to utilize for our men and for area departments. Right now, we are actually hosting an inspector's class through a private education company through Kilgore College. It's Fire in Texas, and that's to certify our 3 newly promoted lieutenants, as well as we were actually able to take advantage of a free slot, so we were able to put an additional firefighter in there so that we can stay up on our inspections. Just as an example, and I've included this at the bottom of this slide, the current cost for the inspector's class was $875 per student. We did manage to get that free spot, so we actually have 4 of them going in there, but there was the cost at 3 students at $875. We paid $348 for the required textbooks for that class. There will be an $85 testing fee for all 4 of the inspectors, and an $85 initial certification fee for each one of those inspectors. So when you add all that together, it comes out to approximately $1,900 just for this one class to certify the 4 firefighters as inspectors. This is just an example. Currently, we actually do annual fire inspections. We're required by the state to do that annually, at least once a year. It is recommended that we will probably start doing that twice a year. Currently, we are a little behind just because we haven't had all the certified inspectors. So we're moving in the right direction. I anticipate next month, after I have these additional 4 inspectors certified, we're going to hit the south side of 410. We'll start our inspections and start moving forward with there, finishing by the end of the year, and then the first of the year we'll do the north side, and we should be on a regular schedule then to make sure that we're keeping everything up to date and on top of that. I'm asking for an increase in our uniform allowance. This maintains a professional appearance of all personnel. With this, there's become an increase in uniform cost. Average cost of the uniform polo shirts that we wear, once you purchase the polo with the embroidery, is $55 to $65, depending on the style of polo that they buy. We limit their choices because we want everybody to look the same. Average cost of our EMT or cargo pant is $60 to $75, depending on which uniform supplier we go with. Then you have the added cost of station boots, belts, department t-shirts, something I did not list on there, jackets, sweatshirts. Additionally, the city pays for the bunker gear that we wear to fight the fire. However, we purchase flashlights, extrication gloves, additional firefighting equipment out of our uniform allowance. I've had people ask me, why can't we go to Home Depot, Walmart, something like that, buy a $10 flashlight to use for firefighting? And unfortunately, they don't last. They're not made for the service that we do. So it's an added cost. Now the big one. I'm a brand new fire chief, and I'm going to ask for a ladder truck. It's not just because I'm the brand new chief and I think, yeah, let's get a brand new fire truck. This is actually something that has been coming for a couple of years now. And to give you a little history on this truck, this is Ladder 109. It's a 1998 E1 75-foot Quint. It has approximately 39,000 miles on the truck itself and 7,065 engine hours. What this doesn't reflect and what the engine hours does is the idle time that we sitting on scene. We don't shut the trucks off, as well as when we go into pump, the engine actually turns the pump itself. So that's an additional strain on the vehicle. This particular truck, a Quint, is, it serves 5 purposes in the fire service, and it's defined by the National Fire Protection Association as having a pump, a water tank, fire hose, an aerial device, and ground ladders. There's a need for this. If we're going to continue to have a ladder truck here, it has to be a Quint. In the event that our fire engine or the engine 109 goes down, we have to have a backup. And this truck actually serves dual purposes. So we get dual credit for having this truck. It counts, 1, as a ladder truck, and 2, as a fire engine or pumper. Most of the city of San Antonio or larger cities, their ladder trucks do not have a pump. They do not have a water tank. It is strictly an aerial device with compartmentation to carry rescue equipment. Ours, we actually benefit from being able to do multiple purpose with this vehicle. Some of the problems that we're beginning to encounter with this truck, next year will be 20 years old. Parts are becoming more difficult to locate. Last year, we actually had the transmission housing crack. We attempted to replace the housing, but it was no longer available. So they basically welded the transmission housing back together and put the truck back together. Essentially, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, kind of putting a Band-Aid on it for the time being. The aerial itself is only 75 foot tall, reducing its usefulness during rescue operations as well as for firefighting operations on our 2 largest buildings, the Wedgewood and 1 Castle Hills. This ladder will not reach the roof of either of those buildings. In addition to the 75 feet that we get with the aerial height, we also achieve that with horizontal reach, or in other words, when West Avenue used to be as bad, we actually used this truck to rescue 2 victims out of the water on 2 different occasions here at West Avenue and 410 in high water. We were actually able, and you may have noticed earlier this week, the city of San Antonio did the same thing. They backed the ladder truck down as far as they could safely. They were able to extend the ladder out, and they were able to reach the victim that was on top of the roof of the vehicle. We've actually done that here. Right now, it only extends out. It's not quite 75 feet because you lose the height of the truck with that, but we would get greater reach. And the other reason I bring this up is when you take an apartment complex like Arbor Grove that's on Jackson Keller inside our city, we cannot get our apparatus all the way around the apartment complex. That in itself creates a problem. If we have a large fire, we have to extend the ladder over it. We may be using it for ladder operations or spraying from the ladder itself. We get the additional reach with the taller ladder. I'm proposing to replace this with a 107-foot tall ladder, which is more or less the industry standard, kind of the common ladder height that most everybody around us is doing. In addition to that, the Wedgewood, we saw the need for a platform device on the end of the ladder. Currently, ours is what, in slang terms, what firemen refer to as a straight stick or just a straight ladder. The firemen can stand on it. There are foot pads that we can extend out and we can stand on it. However, if we were to bring, such as the Wedgewood, an elderly victim down from that height, we're either going to have to require them to climb down that ladder, or we're going to have to try to assist them to stay there and then potentially try to lower the ladder, and it becomes quite risky then. With the platform, it becomes safer for firefighting operations for the firefighters involved, as well as the victims potentially that we would be rescuing. Right now, there's an increase in our repair and maintenance costs associated with this truck. Last year, this year alone, year-to-date 2017, it's been out of service 15 days. 15 days doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a day where we didn't have that truck, and it doesn't benefit us or the residents or anyone else. Last year, and these are the only 2 years that I have figures for, unfortunately, we weren't keeping track of it as well. The previous years, it spent 24 days out of service. That's almost a month out of service on repairs. The big key one here that I'd like to talk about is it loses its insurance service office rating credit after it becomes 20 years old. The insurance service office, or ISO, is what helps to dictate what our residents pay in insurance prices and premiums because of, basically, the city is assigned a rating. The city of San Antonio just recently became an ISO 1, which is the best classification you can get, thus lowering insurance premiums for all the residents of San Antonio. Currently, I believe we're at a 4 or a 5. It is my goal after this year, once things start to settle down, I'm going to work diligently to try to get that lowered. I met with the chief and one of the lieutenants from Hollywood Park today. They recently began the process. We're going to kind of collaborate and see what we can't do. But that's a big one to me when looking at the age of this truck. Year to date, cost of repairs for the ladder itself, we've paid $6,633.96 to replace basically the ladder hydraulic cylinders that lift the ladder. We had to have them rebuilt. Leaking hydraulic lines, engine repair. We had a check engine light that came on with a camshaft sensor. Pump valve repairs. We have hard water and they're beginning to show their age. They're leaking valves. It's much like your faucet at home when you have to replace cartridges and things like that. It's very similar. Last year we had the repair to the transmission housing. We had a waterway leak, which is the actual water pipe that's on the bottom of the ladder. We've had the pump priming motor seems to be problematic the last couple of years. We've got a couple of years of repairs to it. The tank to pump valve was leaking, which is the valve that actually transfers the water from the water tank on the truck to the pump assembly. The speedometer wasn't working, which I don't know that we'd get any speeding tickets in that truck, but we potentially could. I know Sergeant Wagner likes to watch us pretty hard. In addition to that, 2015, we had issues where we were losing power in the truck. Found out that the fuel tank was heavily rusted. We actually had to have the fuel system cleaned. They had to remove and reseal the fuel tank. The fuel pump was actually cleaned out. We replaced the water tank gauge. There's been air conditioning repairs. I know that AC, probably, you think AC in a ladder truck, what's the big deal? But I'll tell you, it's a welcome relief in August, once you've come out of a house fire, to be able to climb in that truck and cool off for 10 minutes or so until you go back to work. So I'm a big advocate of the air conditioning in the fire truck. And then we had a wheel seal repair. 2014 repairs included hydraulic system leak repair on the outriggers, repair the engine brake, which is an additional brake to the brake system itself, that actually uses the power from the engine to divert to the brake system and helps you to slow. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I'm nervous still. I've calmed down quite a bit, but I'm still a little nervous. I keep looking to, yeah. I keep looking to Mr. Gregory, and I'm just waiting.
I think if you asked how many of the council members had vehicles without air conditioners, you could have stopped right there.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah. In addition, I'm asking to replace our aging air conditioning system in the fire station. This last year, on Christmas Day, we had a actually warm day for Christmas. One of the compressors failed. There's 2 5-ton units that supply a 10-ton air handler inside the station. One of the compressors failed, causing half the system to go down. We actually stayed without that system till after the first of the year, till it could be repaired and we could allocate the money for those repairs. It was approximately $7,500 to replace the compressor. It then failed a second time in March, and we were fortunate to have that repaired while it was still under warranty. One of the key things that was noted by the companies that I had come out to give us bids, by 2020, the refrigerant that's used in the system will no longer be available. Right now, the cost for that refrigerant per pound, one technician told me it went from $30 a pound a number of years ago, 10 years ago. He said he just recently paid a little over $300 a pound for that refrigerant. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And apparently, the big thing right now is a lot of the AC companies are stockpiling what they have. They're sitting on it because they know that there's, yes, sir, same thing. So that's something else to keep in mind in the future. Currently, the system fails to adequately cool the station. It's a constant battle where one half of the station is cool, one half is warm. We adjust. We have 2 thermostats, one outside my office, one inside the kitchen area. It's a constant battle. we turn one up, we turn the other one down, we cool the opposite side. By that time that happens, we're now moving to the other side. And this is no exaggeration, but you can probably start watching the system about the middle of May through typically the middle of September. Our AC system runs 24/7. It never shuts off, and I'm not exaggerating. And it's running right now. It'll run all night, and it's a constant strain. One of the technicians that came out did a balance. They checked the system for balance. There was actually, he checked every vent or register that was in the station. He actually drew a map. You're wanting around 230 CFM or over 200 CFM per register. Right now, he estimates our systems were operating at about 80%. I trust this guy. I don't know him directly. He was recommended to me by my brother-in-law that actually does commercial AC work. I felt it a conflict of interest to call my brother-in-law and say, hey, can you come give us a bid? So I did call and say, can you recommend somebody that's going to shoot us straight and be fair? He in turn came out, did this with us. I've actually got some registers that are only flowing at 66 CFM, some that aren't flowing at all. And most of them are flowing right around 150 to 180 CFM. And he actually said that was not that good for the system. I did have 3 companies that I had come and give me bids. I have 2 of those back. Cabana Air, this company, they're coming in right around $17,000. Jet Mechanical came in at $14,000. They spent probably in the neighborhood of about 3 minutes with me at the station. Didn't really listen to much concerns. The bid came back for exactly what we have in the system, and that came in at $14,000. Holt Mechanical came and spent probably an hour and a half with me, did a bunch of different things, looked at a bunch of different things. I've been calling them for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, trying to get that bid in. I finally spoke to one of the managers today. They're not going to have it in time, but they're estimating over $30,000, and I wouldn't entertain that at all.
Chief, quick question. We're looking at between 14 to 17,000 realistically to replace
Realistically,
a
yes.
10-ton unit or the compressors?
The Cabana Air is actually recommending to go to a 12.5-ton unit. Jet is $14,000 going back with a 10-ton unit.
But that's inside and outside?
I'm not sure on the SEER, sir. I'm sorry?
That's inside and outside both?
Correct,
units?
correct. The air handler inside and the two units outside. We have 2 units feeding 1 air handler on the inside. And I apologize, I don't have copies of these, but I'm happy to make them. But these are the 2 bids that I received. Okay.
Capital maintenance budget on the whole property?
I'm not sure about fire not counting, but yeah, we do have a house fund, not a house fund, but it's a capital improvements fund. I'm not sure off the top of my head. No, sir, I'm not. We can check and find out for you, though.
Chief, you
Yes, sir.
said something a while ago. You said 2 5-ton units.
Yes, sir.
Then you told me 10-ton.
It's
So
a,
you're saying to go ahead and replace both of them is what you're saying?
so what it actually is, sir, and I apologize for not
That's all right.
explaining that properly, but it's a 10-ton system. So it's a 10-ton air handler inside the station supplied by 2 5-ton units outside.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I mean, I know that I need to replace compressors on 2 of my air conditioning unit, and it's $5,000 a piece for those. So I think what we'll save in electricity, probably from it running all the time.
I truly think that our utility
I would not like to see.
utilities
feelings
should go down.
Yeah.
I would anticipate that, and that was one of my concerns when I tried to talk to the companies, where I know that we have some probably pretty high utility costs at the fire station.
What brand unit?
It's a train. Cabana Air actually told me that the reason why our system is probably still working like it is because of the brand. It was a train unit. He actually said that was a very good brand, and said he was surprised that it was in as good a shape as it was for 18 or 19 years old. So,
Chief, is there any salvage value in what we have?
I'm not sure, sir.
Chief, I'll give you a couple of names afterwards that I think would probably give you a pretty fast estimate.
Wonderful.
One of the firms, their president lives here in the city, and he's a pretty good guy, Mr. Friend.
I'd love to talk to him.
You know, it's pretty Comfort Air.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, we'll talk later.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. Looking at this, this is based off a 3% increase, which would be what we've done historically over the last few years. The numbers for salaries, there'll be an increase of about $34,000. The retainer fee, which is our overtime, I apologize, I don't have that in there, but that would stay the same at 35. Longevity pay, I would anticipate that going down slightly after Chief Riedel retiring and Captain DeHart retiring, two of our more senior, longer employed employees. And then, of course, going with the employee insurance, this is all based off the recommendations from finance and moving forward. This is where we get into my asked increases in the uniform allowance. I'm asking for $2,000 more, which would essentially give $100 per firefighter in addition to what they're receiving now. I'm asking for a $5,000 increase in our training budget, which is actually a 50% increase in what we currently have. Currently, we're at $10,000. I'm asking for $15,000, and then a $2,000 increase in our vehicle maintenance budget. Roughly, that's approximately an increase of 3.83% to the fire department.
Hey, Chief, quick question. Can I ask a question, Mayor? The increase in the training, do you think you could reasonably guarantee that we would get a better rating with the ISO?
We would have more, just like right now, we're going to have more inspectors on staff. In addition to that, I have a bunch of young firemen that want to go to school. They're wanting to learn, and they're wanting the certifications. And we're actually requiring now with promotion that they have the inspector, they have their fire officer 1 and 2, and fire instructor 1 and 2 certifications. I'm actually right now holding on to 2 or 3 education requests from my guys. What we do is basically right now I go through at the beginning of the year, they submit an education request to me. I look at it. If it looks beneficial to the city, then I'll approve it. Once they've got theirs, they know that they kind of move to the back of the line, so to speak. I give the opportunity to the next firefighter to come up, and I try to limit to where one firefighter isn't getting all the training and getting all those monies, and try to be fair and spread it out across all the firefighters. I do believe that it would help us with our ISO rating. We would have more certified inspectors. We can get more certified investigators on board, and that really serves for us. When I was a lieutenant and a captain on shift as an arson investigator or fire investigator, I wore a couple of different hats. It gave Chief Riedel the opportunity. I could call him and say, this is what we had, this is what I found. It's your discretion, Chief, if you want to come in and look at it. Oftentimes, he took my word for it. He was comfortable with that, and we were able to just keep going along and handling business as usual. Certainly, if we have more instructors on staff, that's going to increase our training that we can do in-house, which will give us additional training hours, which will help with our ISO rating as well. It'll give us more credits. But yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Chief, back when you met with Moretta and I in June for or May for our little orientation with all
Yes,
the
ma'am.
department heads, you had mentioned the lifespan of the boots and the pants and the jackets
ma'am.
that you all have for your helmets.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any increases built into the budget for anything that is coming up?
So I was going to ask to start replacing gear this year. However, we have a 3-year window there that I'm kind of pushing off till next year to help offset replacing the system, as well as the added cost of potentially replacing the ladder truck. With that, I did just place an order for 5 sets of boots. We have recently began replacing helmets. I have 10 helmets that are going to be replaced in the next year, probably at roughly $300 per helmet. That is just an estimate, an approximate. Recently, the 5 pairs of boots that we replaced, we're mandated every 10 years to replace them. We have to. That's the Texas Commission on Fire Protection recommends that. What we had, like last year when we replaced all our breathing apparatus, it was a recommendation off of the Texas Commission on Fire Protection. They no longer recognize those as being any good. We have to replace them or we'll start receiving fines, and then they'll ultimately can shut down the department. So that's the same thing. I anticipate next year we'll start replacing gear, probably 6 sets, which is what we've done in the past. So it helps to soften that blow of the cost of replacing. We'll do 6 sets. This next year, the following year, 6 more sets, and the last year, the 7 or so sets that are left.
Last question.
Yes, ma'am.
We'd also discussed the concept of having the uniforms dry cleaned, that there was some indication that you all needed to have some kind of regular maintenance of them.
The uniforms, I'm sorry, the gear,
Your
our
gear,
fire
yes.
gear. Currently, we actually have a great relationship with Chavano Park.
Okay.
And they have what's called an extractor, which is required. I would truly see probably in the coming years, and I would say probably in about the 5-year range, we're all going to be required to have extractors in our stations, and it's like a souped-up washing machine, for a lack of better words. It actually removes the debris, the carcinogens, different things out of there, makes it safe for us to wear again. So right now, we currently send all our gear to Chavano Park. They take care of that for us in-house. Yeah. I've been waiting, Mr. Gregory.
When did we start ISO?
ISO, as long as I've been here, ISO, I'm not sure when they started. I can get you that date, but
Been here a long time.
it has, yes, sir.
Well, here's the question.
Yes, sir.
How much is this truck going to cost?
We're looking at approximately $1 million, and that's a big hit. To that, I will tell you that we have close to, if not right around $500,000 in a new vehicle purchase already saved and allocated with one of the local companies that actually builds the trucks. They're owned by Oshkosh, which some of you may be familiar with, Pierce Manufacturing. They have a very good working relationship with their finance company to give low rates. And what we did when we purchased the engine in 2008, we put down what we had allotted, the $400,000, I believe, or somewhere roughly in there. We finance the rest, and what they do is they call it a lease. You make your payments. They can do it on a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year term. At the end of the lease, you have a final payment that's due, and typically that's $1. And so I actually discussed with them a little bit, starting to kind of talk and find out what we're going to need to do with that. I don't have the figures right now, just because it was all preliminary, but I anticipated doing a 3 to 5 year lease purchase on the vehicle to make up for the missing funds and having it paid off by the 5-year mark. Yes, sir. It is, yes, sir. It's been paid off for a couple of years now. On the ladder truck, on the old one. I will tell you that this year we did have a big expenditure on the engine, just with a few of the systems that went down, and that's to be expected. I don't see that as being as problematic right now as the ladder truck, but yes, we did have that expense as well. Yes, sir.
Tim and I were on council when we finally had a fund set aside for that.
Yes, sir.
Why do we need to go to 107 feet?
Right now, you have one Castle Hills at 1100 Northwest Northwest Loop 410. That's an 8-story building, and that's roughly 100 foot tall, and the Wedgewood. If you saw any of the news footage from the Wedgewood when it burned, Platform 32 from San Antonio actually backed up and raised their ladder to the penthouse, and they were actually able to reach the penthouse with their 110-foot platform. They were able to evacuate the 2 victims from the balcony and bring them down. Currently, ours is 75 foot, which roughly, depending on, we have to account for 4 to 5 feet off the side of the truck to bring our outriggers out, so that brings us away from the building some. Ideally, we want to be out of the collapse zone. Every time we move the truck out a little bit further from the building, we lose vertical reach. Roughly, right now, we have a working height of about 6 stories with our current truck.
What's the difference in price for a 75-foot versus a 107-foot?
I don't know off the top of my head. I can get you those figures.
It seems to me the interlocutory agreements we have with San Antonio and other cities would cover us if we needed a 107-foot ladder or bigger.
San Antonio currently, with the Wedgewood, the way our current mutual aid agreement works with San Antonio, we have to exercise all resources available to us before they come in. It basically has to be a catastrophe. So I see that changing in the future, but right now it limits us with how often they will come into our city and assist us. Balcony Heights is currently having issues with their ladder truck. They do have a platform that is 100-foot tall. The day of the Wedgewood, it was down, and they actually did not bring it until late into the event, so it wasn't available to us initially. Leon Valley has a 100-foot platform that would be available, but that's a 10 to 15 minute trip down the street. So if they're not, I don't know, with fire. That I don't know, Mayor. I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but it did cost the city. We were charged by the city of San Antonio. They wanted us to initially replace all of their bunker gear that was used by their firefighters because of the being exposed to asbestos. I think ultimately we came to an agreement and replaced 6 or 10 sets, while we did not replace any of our bunker gear for any of my firemen. With that, I don't remember what was. I don't know. I wasn't involved on that end of it at that time, so I can try to find that information for you, sir.
Well, that's a very good question, because that goes to the heart of what we can't afford. Are we being penny wise and pound foolish? And so I think
Sure.
we really would need the numbers to that.
Yes, sir.
The other question I would have is, if you buy a 75-foot ladder truck, knowing that you really need a 100-foot ladder truck to accommodate all your residents, and you have an incident, and somebody, God forbid, perishes in the top of that building, would you be potentially subject to a lawsuit saying you bought a ladder truck that didn't accommodate your residents, and that couldn't rescue your residents from a burning building? Well, one is inventory already on hand, and the other is when you've already factored in the fact, and you've already had an incident that required a 100-foot truck, and if it wouldn't have been for the city of San Antonio, it could have turned out a lot worse. Plus, go ahead. I just think, personally, I think you should, your plan should take into account as much as possible the service that you're going to need to render with that vehicle. You shouldn't I think you would be, as Councilman Gregory says, penny wise and pound foolish if you're not careful on that.
I would say prepare for the worst, and this probably closer to next year, but with the added maintenance that we've experienced over the last 2 years, he and I talked extensively about that as I was coming in. Prior to actually knowing I was coming into this position as a shift captain, we talked extensively at the coffee table when the guys would begin their truck checks about the need for replacing this truck. There's some added incidents that have happened with this truck that have probably created some undue wear on it. This truck actually was, I hate to say this, but extended into the power lines beside the fire station, which created a $30,000 repair that was actually covered by our insurance because of user error. We were attempting to rescue a stranded motorist in high water at Carrollwood and Banyan. We had conflicting reports on where she was actually at. This truck was moving into position to find her. They had gone one way. They were on Banyan at Carrollwood. They then told us that she was on Garden View or Glen Tower, one of the southern streets. Coming through there, we had the incident where it actually flooded in the water, and we had to repower the truck. It was repowered with a rebuilt engine. However, the rest of the truck remains 20 years old, even though the power train for the truck is somewhat newer. We're starting to experience electrical issues that, talking to engineers with the manufacturers, are common with a truck that's been electrified, if you will. We're starting to experience that, where we're having issues with that, so.
But to answer the mayor's question, the approximate life of the truck was 20 years.
Right, we anticipated
Chief
replacing
was
it at 20.
telling us it would last till about 2019, 2020. This is back in 2003.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can, because we're gonna, I'm sorry, ma'am. Potentially, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Right, and Hill Country Village went with the city of San Antonio. Yes, ma'am. You're absolutely all right, Ms. Winger. Thank you. I did. I had rested my hand on it. No, sir, that's it.
Before everybody starts rolling their eyes, I come back to the income part of this and how we're gonna pay for it. You know, I'm a businessman, you're a businessman, everybody here is, not everybody, but a lot of people are. And, you know, I was talking to the mayor of Brackettville, I think it is. Yeah. And I was asking him about things that they do for income. Obviously, they're about, I think they're a little bit smaller than we are, but they have some pretty good equipment up there. And you know, and this isn't meant to be funny, but you know, their sanitation department built a building up. It wasn't Brackettville, it was Padre. Anyway, I called about 5 of them. One of those cities has a dog wash. Now, y'all laugh at me, y'all say, what the hell, heck? And, but what happened was their animal control center set up a deal, okay? And the reason I'm bringing on this, have we talked about grants? Have we looked into that? Have we thought about income
Yes, sir.
producing things that departments do?
I've started researching grants extensively. For the cost this high for a grant, the only one that's available really to us for a ladder truck, if we were in the market for a brush truck or something that would use on brush or grass fires, we could get it tomorrow. However, with a ladder truck, the only one that's really marketed to that is the FEMA grant that's available. In fact, I will put in for it, and I'm going to put in to replace our ladder truck with it, and hope for the best. But there's a short time period where we have to get our paperwork in and submitted, and then they close it out, and then they start awarding it at a certain time, and they'll do a series where they award first, award, later to a number of cities. The problem that we're going to have is the reserves that are actually great for the city. They're going to look at that and they're going to say, well, you have enough in reserves, and they're going to challenge. I anticipate the challenge for that grant. I would anticipate us being able to work grants better to buy specialized equipment for the department. I'm looking at grants right now for training to help offset that as well. Just being, looking at things.
So what you're saying basically is we're too rich.
Unfortunately, yes, sir. Essentially, they're gonna look at us on their list of who would benefit better from it, and Just looking at it from a realistic standpoint, yes, sir.
Well, while we're going through this budget process, I do want to go on record saying now that, you know, we've got the billboards coming up, that we're gonna be working on for income on Northwest Military Drive. But as the department heads, Rick, I would really like to see us reach out to some other cities and just find out what they're doing. The dog wash thing was crazy until I found out the guy's knocking down about 600 a day. The residents bring their dogs in from everywhere, and they've got a little thing, and they stick their credit card in there, and they put their dog up on the thing and spray him like a car, and then they have a blow dryer and all this kind of stuff, and then Fido, you know, and it's,
I'll hook up a fire hose to the side of the station.
Well-
We'll see what we can do.
you know, I'm honest to God, not trying to be funny here, but, you
No,
know.
and I
think
apologize,
think
Mayor.
No. I think it's police, fire, sanitation, that we ought to reach out, not only from the grants aspect, but, you know, there's some crazy stuff going on out there. And you look at it, and next thing you know, we're offsetting costs, we're providing the service. One of them was even doing a Friday, a cook-off, making money on it.
Wow.
So, yes.
So, okay, can I speak to an idea?
About the dog wash?
No, revenue stream.
Oh, sure.
After 2 hours sitting in the passport office to renew 2 passports for our children down in San Antonio, I got on, because I had 2 hours, and realized that you can apply to be a passport acceptance facility. And you get $25 for each application that's paid directly to the city. You have to be a municipality. You can't have any affiliation with a nonprofit or whatever. So we clearly are an acceptable place for a passport facility. Not only is it $25 for the passport fee that we get to keep, almost every single person had them take the picture, which was $15 plus the sales tax on the $15, which was $2 and something cents. So about $41 per kid later, San Antonio had made $82 off of us applying for passports in their facility, when I would have much rather have come over here to City Hall. And I have reached out to them, and they have actually contacted me and sent me the whole packet on what it takes to be a passport facility. They've got all of the internet capabilities. You just have to fill out the application. And it's not easy. You have to show that you're going to be open for at least 20 hours a week. But it's certainly a nice revenue stream. If you figure even if you did 50 a week, you could make $100,000 in a year.
Kurt, I don't want to, thank you, Amy. I don't want to get too far off the thing, but let's, in your Tuesday meetings where we have the staff thing, I'd like to see that put as a line item to see what's going on, and maybe we could, you know, what'd you look at this week, or well, I didn't have time, well, what about next week? You know, and eventually we're going to, you know, we're a landlocked city. We're hard pressed to come up with money. We're known as a speed trap. I don't know that we can give out any more tickets than we give out, or whether we want to, in case anybody's watching. But we have to, you know, we're going to have to think smart. And in order to do that, do we want to cut services? No. Do we want to, what do we want to do? We want to keep the resident in mind first, keep the taxes low, and provide the best services possible. Thank you for that thing. So I'm not going to say any more other than that. I know that my thoughts are echoed by Mr. Gregory, because we've talked about that. And of course, I wouldn't talk to more than 2 councilmen. That wouldn't be legal. But Mr. Paul has expressed that. So maybe, thanks. Did you have anything to say, Douglas?
What's the turnover rate in the fire department?
We're very fortunate, sir. We seem to have a pretty good retention rate. I've got a brand-new rookie right now that we hired to replace my position as I came up. And we just replaced for Captain DeHart. Outside of that, I believe our last hire was 4 to 5 years ago. We seem to benefit from keeping our firemen typically quite a bit. Right now, my one rookie is number 50 on San Antonio's list. When I do lose them, it's to the big city, San Antonio, New Braunfels, San Marcos. I don't anticipate him staying with us, unfortunately, through the end of next year. He's going to go to San Antonio, given the opportunity. He's a great kid. He's been awesome to have in our city, and I want to take advantage of that as long as I can. And I keep trying to tell him about all the horrible things I hear about San Antonio, but unfortunately, I don't know that I'll be able to keep him. But
Like getting burned up.
I'm a big believer in training.
yes, sir.
I see nothing wrong with the increase of the training budget. But I wonder whether or not we ought to have something that says, if you leave before 5 years,
I could
retroactively claw back the cost of your training.
I could not agree more, sir. And that's something that I've actually discussed with Mr. Vandewally, and it's something that I believe we're going to propose this year. If we invest that money in these firefighters, that they would be required to stay 2-3 years beyond the class, and I think that would be in the best interest of the city. Absolutely.
Mayor, may I ask a question?
I apologize for being long-winded, but yes, sir.
Mayor, may I ask a question? Chief, do you think that having the bigger ladder would help you reach the homes in the bigger lots?
Absolutely, it would, without a doubt. And that's something, we do have some very large areas, very large lots. One thing that we have to contend with are these beautiful oak trees, and that may limit some of the, using that ladder to reach some of those, but it certainly would help us when we're dealing with a large fire or a large structure. Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, I still hope to see the difference between a 75 and 100, whatever you want, the difference between the two trucks.
I will definitely have that for you, Mr. Gregory.
I was curious on one thing, and I couldn't find it here, so it's just a question. We used to charge for EMT supplies for the people that we go to in service. Do we
Yes, sir.
still do that?
So what we're doing now, we utilize Fire Recovery, which is a third-party company that we use to help offset the cost of that. We are billing currently for car accidents, vehicle fires, things of that nature. We do not bill our residents. This is something that goes to the visitors that pass through our lovely city. And unfortunately, I think right now we have the potential to have $10,000 in collections. However, we've only collected $5,000, and it's just because they're still kind of up in the air. The company's dealing with the insurance companies, but we've, to date, I believe my number was right, a little bit over $5,000 that we've collected. Initially, we did charge a $50 fee for EMS, and then once we had made house or the patient over 3 times in a calendar year, they would be charged. But I believe we did away with that before Chief Riedel left.
Chief Riedel would be very proud of your presentation.
Thank you very
good
much, sir.
presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Everyone, the next, let me find that agenda. Oh, here it is. There's citizens to be heard on here, and,
We still have the admin brief to go through, Mayor.
oh, boy.
Yeah. You want to take a
Can
little?
we take
you wanna
5 minutes?
Okay, 5-minute break.
While we're in the middle of that break, I did get a call or a text from John Kinney, and all the 20% of the proceeds from Thai Topaz tonight will go to the CHCO.
I think that was till 9 o'clock, Mayor.
Do we need to reconvene there at Thai Topaz, Mayor?
Till 9 o'clock. Thai Topaz. Oh, all the 20% of the proceeds from anybody who comes in is going to go to the CHCO fund. Well, actually, Thai Topaz. Thai Topaz on Northwest Military. Yeah. Mhm.
Mayor, I think your 5 minutes is up if you're ready. Oh, okay.
Okay, here we go. All right, next on the agenda.
Yes, Mayor, we're going to talk a little bit about the admin budget here, and then we've got some follow-up stuff to do from the last budget workshop, just a couple of changes that we had that we wanted to brief you on from both police and public works.
Thank you.
So I'll jump right into this because I don't want to keep us here too late. This is an overview of what we'll be talking about tonight, first starting with budget assumptions, then we'll do some summary work, then we'll go through the administrative budget and the court budget, and then Councilman Gregory had asked that we do some income versus expenses comparisons for those budget activities that had both an income and an expense to see where we finished in the delta between the two of them. I've got a note on here on salary comparisons, but we probably won't go into that too much. We will talk a little bit more about the TMRS and whatnot, but I did do some salary comparisons, and I have it as backup information if we wanted to go into that. And then finally, there's some other supplementals and initiatives I'd like to talk about that aren't necessarily included in the budget, but I think that there's something that I've heard various people talk about since I've arrived here, and something that I think we may need to factor into the budget in the public hearing. Okay, the budget assumptions, first of all, that we have built this budget using last year's tax rate, and we intend to keep it at that. Also, kind of akin to what our fire chief said, the quality of service will remain at existing levels with incremental improvements. The personnel expenses throughout the budget reflect a 100% fill rate, which is not reality, but we may get lucky and fill up our staff, and then they'd be full for the rest of the year, so we want to budget for that. Expenses will not exceed revenues, so we'll have a balanced budget. I'm recommending that we do a cost of living adjustment of 3% in the salaries that you'll see in the budget. And there are a couple other salary increases that I would like to talk to you about, or salary items that I'd like to talk to you about. We will efficiently use and protect fiscal resources, and any unassigned fund balance would be used for emergencies or council-approved one-time expenditures and capital improvements. So this is the summary sheet, and basically the way this is broken down, and you've seen the same format in Chief Dover's presentation, we show you what the 2017 approved budget is. We show you the proposed 2018 budget, which is highlighted in yellow, and then we show you the percent change, the dollar change on each line item, as well as a percent change, and we'll do that throughout the budget. So as you can see, for this, the income summary will be going to $7.4 million approximately, which represents a 5.68% increase over last year's revenues. A lot of that is due to the ad valorem tax, and that does include the recently passed tax exemption, income tax exemption, or excuse me, property tax exemption. The expense summary at the bottom rolls up the expenses into different bins, starting with it that you've seen basically briefed during the budget workshops: administration, municipal court, police, fires, street, sanitation, and then we've got some compensation, liability, and capital expenses at the bottom for a total of almost $7.2 million. Bottom line, when you look at the bottom, this does represent a balanced budget with roughly $228,784 remaining afterwards. These are a little small here. I think you've got a budget. I think we made copies, didn't we, of the budget, the actual spreadsheets? And you've got them in front of you, so you can see those a little bit easier if you're looking at the slides in front of you, or the spreadsheets in front of you.
Does everybody have one? Okay, everybody happy? Or not? That's what happens when you.
We came up with the projections for the proposed 2018 budget based on a couple different variables, one of which is what was approved in 2017, kind of where we are to date on our current budget and how we would forecast that finishing out, plus any kind of additional information that we might have. And for instance, you can talk to Janet and she'll talk to you about the fact that she doesn't feel like we're going to get as much income on credit card fees this year, liquor license and mixed beverages, food license income, so on and so forth. So, but that's how we formulated this budget. Oops, I'm sorry, I haven't switched, or maybe I didn't, it switched back. But once again, this is showing the incomes, incomes into the city budget. Any questions on those?
Back on the personnel expense administration. It's no big deal, but it changes your bottom line subtotal. Your salary part-time, 24 to 29, but you say there's no percent increase. Now, I'm not questioning the increase, I'm just talking about where it says no percentage increase.
Are you on this sheet here, Councilman?
Personnel expense administration.
Okay, all right. So you're talking about the $0 on the overtime there. That's for administration. So, and pardon?
The next one down.
Oh, for the part-time.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm not arguing the dollars, I'm just saying that it will skew your bottom line increase or decrease because it's obviously got an increase.
The increase is in, that is one person's part-time salary, so. Yeah. Right, so we just combined what we said, did have some in court, we combined them into this one, and that's the percent change, so.
It
I
says,
think Mr. Paul is showing that it says percent change 0, but the number actually goes up. The change is $4,620.
That's what it
Yeah,
says.
so that formula is obviously, they didn't get copied in there right. on
yeah,
that
that's
particular
what I'm
one.
getting at, and then that in turn,
We'll skew
changes
this
the
number down
bottom.
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
No big deal, but it's, just gives me a better understanding of the bottom line.
What this does show, though, is you actually have less overall personnel expenses for 2018 than you do for 2017. And part of that's based on my salary, biggest chunk of it.
On line 4080, we're anticipating a 43% increase in revenues from the STEP program.
Johnny, do you want to speak to that? Right.
Income right around the 200 and I think 20,000. I don't know if we wanted to be as aggressive in projecting 215,000, although it's likely we would go there again. My contention is that you're correct, Doug. So we would leave it the same and enjoy the windfall if there is one, as opposed to being quite that aggressive. But we would certainly
So
clear it this year.
when we looked at this, and we can go back, Minerva, if you'll take a note on that, we'll go back and look at that one specifically. But what we were noticing when we looked at proposed budgets from the past and the actual execution of that budget, there were some that were just off. And I think this is one of those that it was historically under budgeted or underestimated, and then it came in as a windfall virtually every year. They always exceeded, in other words, this particular budget item, they actually always exceeded what they thought they were going to take in. So to try to make the budget realistic as possible, we just used that and factored it in. And I think we actually did add a measure of caution to it as well, so.
And remember too, Douglas, it's, besides the windfalls that we experienced over the years, he's probably visited, and the chief has visited, because we really can't talk about income from tickets and gearing it up or not gearing it up, whatever we do. But maybe what he can do is find out if some of the guys want to work overtime and pick up that extra money by doing that. Keeping our city safe, of course.
Yes, that's accurate. We have quite a few folks out there exercising that step option with some regularity.
Yeah.
Right. So,
In 4020, why are we anticipating a decline in warrant income?
again, this is based on projections and kind of past performance of the budget. I could pull up a spreadsheet that shows all those columns, and it might make a little bit more sense. But this is our best educated guess based on what we anticipate, based on past performance on these particular budget line items. So, Minerva, do you have a full copy of the spreadsheet that has all the columns on it? It was too much to print. Yeah, if you can grab me one, I think it'll help me answer some of these questions.
Mr. Gregory or Mr. City Manager, if I could add.
Which one do you want?
To that, the 4020, the warrants.
Okay.
I don't know that, oftentimes, there's some confusion with the warrant line items in court because there's multiple. There's one for the pass-through for the warrant officer's contract fees, and that's what that looks like to me. The income side of it was closer to 490,000, so that's inaccurate. I think it was just transposed, from the wrong line item off the court income.
So we'll get a revised copy before we vote on the budget.
Yeah, I need to get a copy of the whole ball of wax if I can, Minerva. So, because it will become clear, I can tell you what's happened on those line items in the past. And so we actually went through this budget line item by line item and forecast what we felt was being a reasonable forecast to make them as realistic as possible.
And item 4300, sales and use tax. You anticipate an additional $100,000 to come in. Is the city, everybody's talking about Amazon's taking over the world and retail's going down. How can we expect a $100,000 increase in sales and use tax, or is it most of our businesses are?
Again, it literally is based on projections, based on previous budgets, saying that this is the amount of growth you're going to see in this, and again, when Minerva gets a spreadsheet, I can speak to each one of these a little more clearly. I'm sorry, I should have had it up here when we started off. But it literally is based on previous numbers and previous execution of the budget and where we've wound up. And in some of these, you can see them growing every year, and some you can see them declining every year by a certain percentage. So that's what we factored in when we estimated. And then it is just an estimate based on what it's done historically and what I think it's going to be this year or in 2018. And again, some of that we get informed by what, for instance, how much development we anticipate coming into the city in a particular year. We're not going to have a Pape Dawson or a Bank of San Antonio going in this year, so that's going to limit that particular income on the budget line. So we try to factor that in.
In 4400, court tax reduction of $20,000, is that based on historical figures or just current reductions?
Again, that would be based on the previous budgets. I could just pull up the spreadsheet and we could look at that if y'all would rather do that. I chopped a lot of that out of there
Probably
because
the
there
only
was
one who
so
might wanna
much.
look at it, but don't worry. No,
There was so much. You think it'd be really fine print. So.
I'm through. Thank you.
No, you're right. again, that's our best guess, Mayor. So we did not factor in AT&T, but we certainly can. We can go back and take a look at that line item.
No, finish.
Mobility. The AT&T service, from what I understand, was just to replace their existing service. It was just putting fiber in the ground. So it was, I don't know that it's an increase in service necessarily, or it's just service to their current customers that are here in the city of Castle Hills.
Kurt, number 4440, the towing services,
Yes.
what is that, please? How do we have income from towing services?
I don't know, does anybody know how we have income from
Yes,
towing
sir.
services? Janet does,
We can-
Johnny does.
We can speak to that. Anytime that we contract with Richards, which that is our contract towing company now, there is a fee that is associated with towing of those vehicles, whether it be involved in an accident, a crash, or abandoned on the highway, or related to an arrest.
Okay, alrighty, thanks. I had one other question too, not related to that. Do we charge right-of-way rental fees for utility companies? Because we can. Money.
Right-of-way rental fees for
Yes, we
utility
can-
companies? I
yes,
don't believe
we-
we charge them for rental fees for right-of-way.
We are allowed to charge rental fees for the use of our right-of-ways.
I need to go to
they-
that
they
class
are-
you went to, Councilwoman.
They are part of the franchise fees, and so I don't know if it's built into that, but we are entitled to charge for the use of our city. So there are lots of,
Do we charge,
lots of,
pardon? Okay,
the
so it's
right-of-way.
part of the quarterly franchise fee? Okay. The court income year-to-date? It is 338,000. As of June 30th, it was $338,404.
Well, I think income-producing things such as the warrants and STEP, or traffic enforcement.
No, he's,
Well, I think we would be at liberty to talk about that if
sure we can.
the timing. No, sir, it's not a budgetary item yet this year. We're hoping that with council approval, or with moving forward on the impound lot.
Well, no, I was going to say with the impound lot, the person that runs that could potentially be doing the passport applications too in downtime until we get up and running. One person doing two different jobs until she has too much work or he has too much work with the impound lot.
Well, we've met with an agency in the area about Coney's Heights and reviewed some of the data on their program, estimating similar figures as far as vehicles towed, services provided from that impound yard. They started out very aggressively, and they were near $500,000 a year. Over time, the last 4 or 5 years, they've reeled it in to some degree to err on the side of caution in public perception, to about $150,000 to $200,000 annually. We are not being that aggressive necessarily with ours, but we would anticipate a revenue stream upwards of 50,000 and up to 100, maybe 120,000. No annual, but it would be. That's after all expenses. So it'd be another, it could go higher. I don't know what, we wouldn't want to dictate or take away discretion from the officers for what they did.
Oh,
Not necessarily. A lot of our enforcement, whether it be traffic or otherwise, is non-residents because our daytime population is 280,000. So it's very little residential enforcement of any type, whether it be criminal or traffic. But because you don't want to take away the discretion of the officer to do that, I think it would be greater, but we're being cautiously optimistic with our, no, that's exactly correct. And we've got the SB 631 stuff that put, but I'm, again, being cautiously optimistic is all. Like we are with our STEP program and some others.
I'm trying to keep it brief. An impound fee, an impound lot would require a lot of infrastructure. Lights are on all the time, I would think.
Well, no, sir, they wouldn't be on all the time, but it would be monitored with some closed-circuit TV stuff and maybe some low-level LED lights. We reviewed Balcones, no citizen complaints to note for their lot, which is substantially larger than ours would be.
Would there, where would this be put? I mean, I'm talking, it seemed to me, trying to think of where we have the residential areas. The degradation of the residential area, would that be significant enough to where an impound lot ends up a zero-sum game? I don't think you have.
You could build hideaways or giant walls to hide this thing.
We have the property on Persimmon right behind Public Works, so all of this commercially vehicle activity would be all consolidated in one area of our city. It's a nice size lot. I think that Captain Siemens has already done some measurements for it. Moretta and I have done some research. She actually knows what wattage is required for a light on it, and it only needs one light, and it's a very limited wattage that's required. You have to have a 6-foot fence. We've also got, I had a client recently that had to price Fencecrete, and for an 8-foot, I think it was an 8-foot Fencecrete brick exterior that would look like the bottom of Public Works and the sanitation building, it's like $80 a square foot, or $80 a linear foot. So it's not really as much as you think it is. There are a few statutory requirements for it, but it's not that onerous.
Plus, the trade-out would be when you're offering the residents is another, not only from the signs, from the sign income that that is going to be produced to $500,000 in mill and overlay is what, 8 streets? That's a year.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you a question real quick? I know they've been working on it for some time. They're not prepared to really give details, which to me would be a good topic for a work session as opposed to this budget meeting.
Oh, like one of those coming up.
I hope so. But again, I think that like I said, I know it's been worked on for at least a year, a lot of analysis, and until they're ready to tell us, I think we're kind of going a little soon.
And you, well, you might also consider there's perhaps talk of trade-off between raising a house in a flood area, offset the cost of the flooding proposals, maybe put the impound area where you've raised a house. Yeah. Okay.
Working on that. The only reason I brought it up is because, this, talking about a new.
Looks like the early indicators are there would be a solid revenue stream of some time for the city to consider in normal law enforcement procedure. That's right. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. No, that's okay. That's called hijacking a briefing, but that's all right, Mayor. It's your city. Just to answer a few of the questions that we had a few minutes ago about warrants, for instance, and lowering that down to $135,000. Last year, our 2016, spent roughly 130, or earned roughly 134,000 in warrants. In 2015, 137,000 in warrants. Halfway through the year now, 67,000 in warrants, which would put us at the end of the year, if we match that pace, at 134,000, which is why we dropped it down to 135,000 versus 150. For the STEP program, again, that reflects kind of historically what we've been doing in the STEP program. 2015, 171,000, 2016, 211,000. Estimated end of year this year, 236,000. So we just, we made it at 215,000. Felt like that was a pretty conservative estimate of what it would come in at. Quarterly franchise fees, Mayor, you asked about. In 2015, it was 542,000, and I'm rounding, by the way. 2016, 473,000. Year to date, 238,000, which means we're on a glide slope to go to 477,000, which is why we went 475,000. So, and court tax, I think, was the other one that I was asked about. And that, on that particular item, $380,000 in 15, 397,000 in 16. We're on path to do about a 375,000 this year, so we made it at 380,000. So.
Kurt, I have a question about the court fees. If we consider court of record, what effect is that going to have? And maybe that's more Tina. What effect would being a court of record have on the court fees that we're seeing on the income, if any?
I don't think it would have an effect on the court fees. So, but we can ask Ryan Henry and consult with him and H.T. McCall and see what they bring forward. Okay, so we get into the expenses, personnel expenses for administration. Again, if you notice on the salaries, full-time, -3%. That's even in spite of a 3% increase for a cost of living adjustment. This reflects the current staff that we have on hand, and again, for our vacant finance officer position, it counts full salary for that. And now we're on to expenses for administration.
Second. Do we have any intention to bring that position back?
The finance officer, absolutely. In fact, we've received multiple applications. We did some Skype interviews with a number of candidates, but none that we felt like would be good fits for the city of Castle Hills. We've got a couple new applicants that have applied, and I've got a call into a lady who is a retired finance director for the city of Alamo Heights to potentially come on part-time in the interim. But to be just completely upfront, we've been all so swamped doing the budget that there hasn't been a lot of time to schedule interviews or get this set up. We put some effort into it early on, but we've all been completely overwhelmed with budget and other items. So.
Position is filled, how does that change the budget?
It won't. We're just using the previous salary for the finance officer. We left that in the budget.
Kurt, does this include a full-time IT position for going into
No.
the next year? Okay, so it'd still be
No.
part-time for that.
Yes. Yeah. There are a couple personnel issues that we'll talk about towards the end. There's one for police, and I've got one for public works that I'd like to mention, but as we've discussed before, Amy, I don't know that we would get the return on investment for that. But it certainly can still be considered. This is the first half of the expenses on the administration side. And Again, these are, the numbers that we've come up with are based on performance of the budget in the past. So, and I can read those out to you if you want. We have a public hearing on the 24th, is that right, Minerva? And then we have approval of the budget September 12th at the council meeting, and then there's another date on the 7th. So if we need the date on if we need to use the 7th, we'll use the 7th, and then approve the budget on the 12th at the council meeting. It's on September, okay, so it's mandatory. And the dates of the meeting scheduled for next week. I don't know that we have any meetings on the calendar next week. They have a meeting, there is a meeting. And we have a second council meeting on the 22nd, but that's not next week, it's the following.
I have a budget meeting on the 17th on the calendar.
Yeah. So if we need another workshop, we can have it. So when Minerva built the budget, when she built the budget calendar, she added some extra days in case we needed to come back to it. So I think that was one of our optional days, but we don't have a meeting scheduled then this winter. Any other questions on this page? Any other questions on any of these particular items?
I do. Number 5028, I'm assuming sanitation inspector, that's the health inspections for our restaurants and food
Yes.
service facilities?
Yes.
Okay.
So sanitation inspectors, in 2015 was $17,200. In 2016 was $15,774. We're kind of on a glide path right now to be about the $16,000 range, so that's been declining somewhat.
Well, I noticed that each month when we get the health inspection reports, though, the bill is about $1,200 to $1,400 from the fellow that's doing the inspections, so I'm not sure that we're including enough in the budget. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's going to go down $2,000. I don't know how close we want to be with it.
No. I don't know, Mayor. We can take a look at that.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir.
Just wondered about something. Why don't we have city credit cards that we're putting all these expenses on? Since we pay everything in full at the time, a lot of these cards give you a lot of stuff over time. So, I mean, why don't we have that if we?
We do have a city credit card that we use for purchases, so. I don't know, does it?
No, but
Nora?
I mean, but
Yeah,
there
Nora's
are credit
flying
cards
free
that
to
give you a
Mazatlan
lot of
next week.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we do have a city credit card, but I don't know what the plan, what it said on, if we get cash back on the card or not. So there's no incentives on it?
Yeah, I think, well, because it's out there.
No, that's a good question. We could check into that. Okay. Okay. We move to the next slide then. This finishes out the expenses for the administration side. Why do you say that? Which one? Well, this is the one area where we are always over budget. I mean, historically, we're over budget, so. Yeah. Yeah. So Let me find that line item. I could tell you if you want. Yeah, it's, in 2016, we were approved for 36,000 and we spent 108. And this year we were 50, but halfway through the year we had already used all of it. So we break even at the June point, which means we could be on our way for another $100,000 year. So 75,000 may not be enough. It may be too much. It just depends on what comes down the pike.
Is Mr. Brennan not on a monthly retainer? Do we pay him monthly?
No, he's paid on a monthly retainer. This is for Ryan Henry's hourly. Yeah. I wish it wasn't so, Mayor, but a lot of what we've spent this year was on the basis and engaging them with the basis issue. So I think a lot of our residents would argue that was money well spent. Okay. I'm not sure, Mayor. Let's leave them off for today. Let's schedule that for the second monthly council meeting. We're not going to do a workshop on it, no. So this is what Councilman Gregory asked for, which was kind of income minus expenses, because you saw a big sheet with a lot of incomes and a big sheet with a lot of expenses. But when you balance them out and this is reflecting only what Janet and Kit do in our permits office. On the left-hand side, you see their incomes is $327,000. The total between the personnel, the cost for the employees, as well as the operations down at the bottom is $261,789. So they actually make $65,310. Now Janet has we'll put forth with a budget, which is a updated fee schedule, because we find we're losing money on certain activities when we have to go back for re-inspections and whatnot. And so Janet's got some recommendations on that, and that's what's captured in this budget is the new fee schedule as well. So,
Mr. Mayor, make a
Yes.
comment? No, I just wanted to comment that I think that's pretty conservative estimate, given the fact that Janet and Kit probably do a lot of other things, and the printing is used for other stuff. And
oh yeah, I have to tell you, we have a very dedicated city staff. I'm extremely, and Janet and Kit just fall right in there. But Rick got up the other day and said the Public Works motto should be whatever it takes. But really, that should be the whole city staff's motto, whatever it takes, because they help people out, and they typically do it with a smile on their face. And not all the people they deal with are pleasant at these windows up here, but fantastic customer service. Yes.
Kurt, these numbers that you're using for personnel all through this budget tonight, and is that based on the 2-to-1?
1.5 to 1. It's our current.
It's on current.
It's current. Yeah, it's 1.5 to 1. So
we're already almost at 2, then, what you're saying.
what's that?
So we've been at 1.5 to 1, right?
We've been at 1.5 to 1. So yes. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but that's the balance of the income versus expenses. So now we're going to move to court, and again, I can answer any one of these questions that you have. We have a slight increase in the salaries in court, and we've got both Tina and Vicky have recently been certified, have received additional certifications. So we've got some great employees in court doing great things. If you notice that $4,000 on part-time, that's what we moved over into the administration budget. It shouldn't have been carried under court. So it's just one employee, Miss Nora.
Kurt, I missed your answer to Mr. Paul's question about the TMRS. Is that based on the wish list of 2%?
No, all of the salary information you're seeing in the budget brief tonight is 1.5 to 1. It's not. It hasn't been changed. I can tell you what the impact to the budget would be for going to different schemes, but no. Yes. Okay, then we go on to court expenses on the operations side. Yes. Again, the big change in collection fees is, it was budgeted for 40,000 in 2016. It was only 35,000 in 2016 in actuality. Budgeted at 2017 at 40,000, and we're expecting only about 30,000 in expenses this year, so we adjusted that number. Well, right, so we've increased the budget on that, as you can see, from 1,200 to 2,000, so.
Austin, yes, but some of the other cities that the trainings occur in.
So, just like we see in PD, you see, when you had your police department brief, we're seeing an increase in court activity. This is just from the last year, in the number of tickets, violations, warrants issued, and warrants cleared. And likewise, this is revenue comparison for 7 months, the same 7 months in 2016 and 2017. So you can see the court is doing well. This is what Councilman Gregory asked for again, which is the income versus expenses on the left-hand side. You see the total incomes from the court is 1.2 million. And then you see the expenses, personnel expenses on the left, operations expenses on the right, the total expenses here, and then the delta, court actually brings in $452,000 in this budget, which is similar to previous budgets as well. Yeah. He is. I think we pay him $50 for every warrant he collects on, and he brings in a lot of money. Yeah. Did we have somebody doing warrant work for him when that?
I think that was like November last year, October last year.
Do we have a backup like a puppy instead of dog? We got puppy. Oh, we do. Yeah. Oh, I skipped one here. We had Public Works brief last time, but I wanted to show you as well, there was some questions about, particularly in the sanitation department, incomes that they have, and then the offsets. So if you look for the total, the incomes is $493,000, and when you add up the expenses, both the personnel on the left-hand side and the operations on the right-hand side, it's $455,000, so they finish about $38,000 in the positive as well. And I think that was your concern, Councilman Gregory, that we weren't losing money on these activities, but we're at least breaking even or doing a little bit better. Yeah. And then the STEP program is the other one that we'll mention here, and that is we have $215,000 that we've received from in the budget for the STEP program. That'll pay or we'll have about $60,000 in overtime salary doing STEP work for a total of $155,000 additional to the budget.
Kurt, can we go back to the last slide? And I know I apologize that I missed the Public Works presentation, But I'm seeing on here with the expense versus income that we have insect control at $3,500. And in every one of Mr. Emery's reports on his health inspections, he has said that any sort of mosquito spraying has no effect regarding the mosquitoes that carry Zika and the things that we're all worried about. So curious if that's something we can talk about at another point.
Oh, Rick, do you want to talk insect control? Make sure you use the mic. Is it not working?
I so much owe you. Mrs. McLean, what's the question I ask?
With insect control, is that, we've done mosquito fogging before, and so I'm curious, I know we have other things like controlling for roaches and that sort of thing, so I'm just, an explanation. The health inspector has said that the mosquito spraying has been deemed not effective against the mosquitoes that carry Zika, which is what we're all worried about. So I'm curious with that $3,500, I'm assuming we have other insect control things, but is that mostly mosquito spraying or is that other stuff?
No, miss, this is only allocated just for insect control, for fogging, twice a year, sometimes at 3. As you all remember, we had chikungunya just last year, a year and a half, up there on the south side by the Gladiota area, where that it involved more insecticide to help fight that chikungunya. But anything else, if you have any other questions, I can actually bring the rep in to speak on the behalf of the questions that you have. Sure.
On that insect control, I've had 5 citizens contact me that they do not like the mosquito fogging because it kills their lightning bugs, it kills their dragonflies, it kills all their insects, and it doesn't do a lot that they can see as far as the mosquito population is concerned. They're still getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, but it's killing their beneficial bugs. So maybe that is something we need to earmark and look at as a possibility to maybe make some changes. And I only comment because I've had that many citizens actually speak to me on that specific issue.
Rick, is this, when you go out and put mosquito dunks in standing water and stuff like that, that's covered on this as well, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So it's not just a mosquito spray, in other words, there is some beneficial work where they're actually attacking the mosquito larvae where they're breeding, so.
Right, and they're are already going to where they have to a layout in the city. They go up and down the streets, and in the areas, as Mr. Vanderwell was just saying, as you know, behind the Bee's Mexican restaurant, where we have up the creek or lake there, Lake Erie, or what do you want to call it? Other areas that are ponding. There's the one off of the Blanco area, but any special areas that we need to go ahead and spray, we look at and asking him if there's residents that are saying that they have a lot of mosquitoes. But I will say that, our oaks, as thick as they are, once they go down the street, once it hits that tree line, then, well, it's not going to, it just starts precipitating. It doesn't go to the backyard. So what we all suggest is that we all look at seeing about using insecticides just in our home and garden area. I use it at home too because of the fact that that fog doesn't go that far in the back, because like I said, it hits those oak trees and it starts, breaking down right there. But then also too, I myself have gone through a lot of residences for checking out for surcharges and things like that, and I find homes that are actually holding their own little pool in the back. I'm not talking about pools. I'm actually talking about upside down trash can lids, tops, or anything like that. So this is another way that mosquitoes are breeding and holding up their area. But people, residents themselves, as when we first started getting this person to come and speak on the behalf of fogging, he mentioned a lot of concerns as to what, and then you have Mrs. Scott, yes, mentioning other insects. But they were concerned about, fish ponds and their pets and things like that. But, you can almost stand 20 feet behind this fog spraying as they're going out after about 10 o'clock at night and fogging. And they have the concern for the residents, so that's why they wait till that time zone to start spraying out.
I have had, when we've had the spraying down my street, we have decent our oaks aren't too thick in the front yard. And we've seen little change in the mosquito population, but we've lost all of our lightning bugs. And my neighbors in our area inside the loop in the southern cone have the same concerns about the ladybugs and lightning bugs and other things that help us. And so I'd really, there is a very crunchy section of our population, which I will include myself in, that is very concerned about the mosquito fogging.
Okay. Also, lightning bug population peaks probably May, June timeframe, and then it goes away. I mean, that's just lightning bugs.
Okay, so we bought 2 bat houses, and the problem with that is we have 2 big, what we understand from the bat conservatory, is we have 2 big colonies, and they like to be really close together, so they have not, in the 2 years we've had a bat house up, we haven't had a single bat. Send them to me.
No, Chief Dover took care of our bats in there, him and his boys. That ladder truck came in handy. That's all I can say. All legal too, by the way, all legal. So just open the hatch, let them out at night, and then don't let them come back. No. Oh. So I did promise you before we, I guess, that'll be part of this, Johnny. So we've talked about that. Let's talk a little bit about the compensation pay plan, and I don't want to belabor this point because we did bring the gentleman in from TMRS, and I apologize if that was over the top. I just thought this was a workshop, so this was the time to bring somebody in to discuss it. You know, we have a large unfunded liability in the city for comp time, and the council asked to see what that total is. So I'll cut to the bottom line down here. And right now, if we were going to pay out all of our comp time, it would cost $108,000 for the city. Comp time is earned at lower rates, and then it is paid out. We've had, like, for instance, we've had a few employees leave recently. And when they leave, they cash out the comp time they earned when they were, for instance, in Captain DeHart's situation. Some of that comp time was probably earned when he was a basic firefighter. But you pay them out at the hourly rate, their last hourly rate. So one of the things we'd like to institute is when someone moves from a non-exempt position, an hourly position, to a salaried position, that we buy their comp time out before they make that transition from one position to the other, because it's just going to cost you, 1.5 times double if you let it linger until they become a salaried employee. So our current comp time balance is approximately $5,661. That's just for the front office staff up here. The biggest bulk of this $108,000 is in some regard is unavoidable because it's in police and fire. And other than potentially hiring additional manpower so that you don't have to pay comp time when somebody's covering a shift for somebody either in the police or the fire, I mean, the only solution to that would be to hire additional manpower. And we recently paid out $2,359 to one of our employees that just recently left in comp time. So that just goes to show you, the bill to the city if we let that comp time build up.
Let's do this, folks. I'm going to ask council to pass, or at least to give instruction to the city manager that on the finance report every month, we know what the accumulated comp time is. Absolutely. And how we're getting rid of it and what's accumulated on a monthly basis.
Right.
This is serious.
The mayor may remember about 10 years ago, the comp time was over $250,000. We just happened to see that in the budget. And we eliminated that over a 1-year period of time. And it came back, and
well, it's like a credit card is what it is. Unless we address it, unless we bring the elephant in the room, it's going to continue to happen.
Well, let me address it right now. You've got 4 employees in here on comp time right now.
Okay.
And that's just, I mean, part of it is the nature of the city is we do business in the evenings.
We still want to know.
So there is. I mean, but we have some people that are on comp time, and I left off on my list here, so believe it or not, Captain Siemens is an hourly employee. So we have very poorly interpreted the non-exempt versus exempt statuses under the FLSA. So there are certain employees that we have on staff. Tina's one of them that we want to convert to salary. We have dedicated employees that get to a point, and by law, they're not allowed to work more than 40 hours a week because they're an hourly employee. And then that puts them in a tailspin when they do come to work because they have a lot of catching up to do. Tina's one, Captain Seaman's position, when he vacates it, we'd like to commit that to to a salaried position. Code compliance as well. They all meet the definition of salary exempt employees by the FLSA. I've been arm twisting Janet back there to bring her into a salary position, but I don't know that I could afford her salary for as much as she does for our city. But
We all know, Kurt, that it does that, but we can't get hit with $108,000. And this wasn't you. We're not blaming you.
oh no, it was here when I got here, Mayor.
This is spinning out of control, and we don't know it. We don't know it. You know what we could
Yeah,
do? We could
I'd
pay
like-
that off right now with seed money.
Well, I hate to do that. I think what we should do is when we get towards the end of this budget year, and we see how much is remaining in the budget, if we could buy down this unfunded liability to a certain extent, buy it down to a certain level, and then manage it a little more closely, convert some of these employees that are earning comp time,
Kurt,
capping the number of hours that an employee could carry in comp time.
could you show us what a budget for next year would look like if the admin assistant, court clerk, and code compliance were converted to salary employees? So, I mean, if we're gonna do it, we might as well start January 1 or whenever.
You're seeing it right now.
Is it in the budget?
It's factored into this, yes.
So this budget would include having these people?
Yeah.
Because that was
And
my.
so what I'm recommending is, in addition to whatever cost of living allowance they get, Ms. McLean, is adding an additional 2% because they're gonna spend more than 40 hours a week up here. But if we just give them a little bump in salary, I think when we bump their salary a little bit, it will help offset that money they'd lose in comp time and be a show of good faith to the employees that, we appreciate them joining the team as a salaried employee.
And maybe that would also change some situations on how we get interns involved, how we do this. I mean, it's a runaway credit card, folks.
I could see the 2% additional as a one-time thing.
No, yes, it would be 2%. So in other words, we would bump their hourly rate by 2%, convert it to salary, and then they would stay at that plus whatever cost of living adjustment comes down the way. There wouldn't be a 2% a year or anything. It would just be a one-time adjustment, so.
You factored that.
Yes, that's factored into the salaries.
So are we all, before we move down the road, are we all in favor in the monthly finance report that we want to see a comp time accumulation and what we're doing to get rid of it?
Can you make sure, I think for me, it's important to understand, I understand that the fire and the policemen, they're part of that comp time. But for me, it would be nice to know where it's allocated. Is it admin comp time just
Well,
to know?
that's everything is pretty much police, fire, some public works, but not a ton of it. But this is your admin bill. This is the total bill. I think there's,
Well, each department would be give you the
So,
report and it would be.
police is currently about 57,000, fire is about 45,000.
And we're not expecting anybody to work for free or less than services or anything like that. We just want to know. I mean, we just got slapped in the face.
To be fair, I think for me, it shows how much extra time our employees are putting in on behalf of the city.
Sure.
So that you can really appreciate the amount of work, because, okay, so it says 108,000, but, who is it that's giving us that extra
Sure.
time? Is it the police, the fire, our
That's-
administrative assistants? And obviously, it's everyone, but it helps me from my position, understand that extra appreciation, I suppose is what I'm saying.
And my suspicion is this is a low number compared to if they gave you their true comp time, what it would be. Because I have a pretty strong feeling that a lot of them don't report all their comp time. That's not legal. We don't advocate that at all. But, that's the way that's the dedicated staff that you have here. We have done a little bit of trial and error and really Janet, more than anybody else, is to say, look, let's try something here, let's do flex time. So if we're gonna have a late council meeting, we know we're gonna have it, or really for Janet, it's zoning and Board of Adjustment. Those are or zoning, Board of Adjustment, Architectural Review Committee, that kind of falls into Janet. Janet really is our planning and development section, by the way, our planning and zoning section for the city. But when we're gonna have a meeting that we know is gonna run till 9, 10 o'clock at night, don't come in until noon, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and flex time it so that we don't continue to build that comp time balance, which works, but it makes it hard when we have busy days in here at the window and stuff. So, yes, it will. It will.
And my question was, they have to get approval for comp time, correct? They can't just work 40 hours and then just decide they're
Usually it
gonna...
goes like this, Janet, I need you to stay tonight.
Okay, so yes, so there is approval for the comp time, but
Yes.
I'm very excited to hear you say working on flex time, coming in
Yeah,
later
it's-
hours and adjusting that to kind of...
That's what we've been trying to do to chip away at it, and Tina's been doing a great job of trying to reduce it in court and managing it in court, and we're just instituting a little more flex time to try to chip away at this thing, so. Did you want to say something?
Well,
I just wanted to, oh, go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, we want to make sure that department heads know when they're, that nobody's a bad guy here. Nobody's a bad guy. But it's, when something like this pops up, whoa,
Yes, sir, and I just want to add, Mr. Gregory, what you're referring to was back when I think the state authorized up to 480 comp time hours per emergency personnel employees. And when they changed that, you all came in, as many cities did, and bought that down, the uncompensated liability there. As such, we've done a much better job as supervisors and administrators and department heads at managing that comp time. It's now typically no greater than 100 hours per officer, but you often rob Peter to pay Paul in the comp time arena because you tell somebody, hey, you're getting near that 100, take some time off. Conversely, somebody else is caught working an extra case or two that they catch in the afternoon for that individual being off, and as a result, they gain more comp time. It's a revolving door, but we have done a much better job of managing that since that change. I know it's a great debt, but it's better than what it had been, and my contention is it stays around that level. I do agree, though, something needs to be done.
But it is an unfunded liability. So this is some more talk about compensation. Again, the budget reflects a 3% cost of living allowance. From what I understand, that's been what's been awarded to the employees in the past. So we stuck to that. There is one salary adjustment that I'm recommending, and he really doesn't even know I'm going to do this, but I recommend that we increase Rick Harada's salary. Rick hadn't received a raise in a long time, and when I look at him compared to other public works directors, without engineering degrees, mind you, he's at other cities around our area, he's suffering a little bit in that. I did a salary survey and a salary comparison, and I could provide specific detail, but that's one adjustment I would like to make is to give Rick a raise. We're going to convert at least 2 employees, probably 3, and when Johnny vacates his position, that's going to be a salaried position. We're not going to make that a non-exempt position. And then you've heard the proposal to convert the city to TMRS 2-to-1. Just some stats here. Of the 864 cities that are in the TMRS program, 551 of them match at 2-to-1. 92% of TMRS contributing members receive a 2-to-1 match. So in the TMRS program, over 90% of the people that are city employees are receiving a 2-to-1 match. And 4% of the TMRS contributing members receive a 1.5-to-1 match. There are some cities, very few, that do a 1-to-1 match. So at least we're better off than them, but they represent the other percentage here. I ran the numbers based on our salary, not he. Mr. Rodriguez did a $3.5 million as a guesstimate. I ran it on our salary, and the impact to the budget this year would be $217,000. And it stays roughly at that, as you heard him say. It's based on salary, and it's based on that percentage, and so it pretty much would stay that. So every year, your budget will be $200,000 difference. The alternate proposal that you heard was to go to a 2-to-1 with a 6% match. This is marginally better for the employee, but it literally is a recruiting tool, particularly for our police department. And the way that works is, so right now we're at a 7% match at a 1.5 to 1. So the employee puts in 7%, city puts in 10.5% for a total of a 17.5% investment in TMRS. If we were at 6% at 2 to 1, the employee would put in only 6% of their paycheck, so they'd get more money in their pocket. The city would put 12% or 1.5% more than they're doing now for a total of 18%. So the actual investment account is only 0.5% more than it is now. And this, I ran the numbers and I didn't use exact figures, so I'm just going to say he said 67,000. I was somewhere in the high 70s, so I rounded to 80. You saw the budget at the beginning. There's about $24,000, I think, that is available, and I'm going to show you some other supplemental initiatives. And I just ask council to consider this proposal. Like I said, is kind of the compromise proposal. It's better for the employee. I think you would get the 2/3 vote. I've talked to the department heads about it and the staff, and I think we get the 2/3 vote that would be required. It would lower, it would lower their contribution, increase the city's slightly, and I think it would be a recruiting tool for us, if nothing else. Johnny, they don't necessarily ask 2%, 6%, 7%, what it is. They just want to know 1.5 or 2. Which one is it when they come in for interviews? So I'm putting that before the council, and I would again like to continue this line of discussion maybe at a subsequent workshop, as we discussed earlier. So let's see. I guess before we go into this, I wanted to talk 2 things from the previous budget that would also impact the budget and are included, and that is Rick had petitioned to have his contribution to his vehicle purchase plan increase from $40,000 to $50,000 a year. That was favorably received in the last meeting. I think it's extremely wise, and so that is reflected in the budget. And then I'm going to turn it over to Johnny real fast to talk about the second initiative that Johnny would like to advocate for the police department.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Real brief, I know you have a lot to digest. The chief and I, as a result of evaluating the agency under the increased workload that we're currently experiencing and have been experiencing, and consistent with the strategic plan that we submitted to the previous city manager back in 2014 and again in 2015, we identified the potential need at some point to either add a lieutenant or alternate a position from sergeant to lieutenant. As such, that position would take on more duties, aiding us in this current time where we're seeing these increases in workload to include arrests, narcotics, the things that we discussed during our budget workshop previously. In addition to that, or in conjunction with that type of move, there would be a $7,000 increase to the salary component of our current budget. That said, that position would also become, Mr. Gregory, as you write that down, would also become an exempt position as well, alleviating the current comp time accrued. We think that would aid our department greatly as we mitigate the increased workload, dramatically increased workload that we've seen consecutive now for the years that we've been in our current positions. Absolutely. Those additional duties would include that lieutenant position, which is currently the training and administrative sergeant position. They would take on the duties of overseeing dispatch. And lastly, that additional officer, administrator type position would increase our incident command availability to respond and or assume incident command during a crisis such as Wedgwood or the Travertine standoff that we had, and numerous other times that myself or the chief have made it in.
What is the benefit to the city and the benefit to the employee to change to an exempt position?
So the benefit to the city is employees can work more than 40 hours without compensation. That just in a nutshell. And the benefit to the employee is that they are not hidebound to a 40-hour week in order to get all their work accomplished. Really, that's it in a nutshell. It kind of puts you in a different category, in a professional category versus an hourly category.
What do you mean by high-bound?
Well, so if I've got a report that needs to be run and I hit 39 and a half hours and it's going to take me another hour and a half to run that report, I can't work that without approval from my supervisor to earn comp time for it. And comp time is earned at time and a half. So say it takes an extra hour, then they get an hour and a half of comp time because it's in effect the same thing as overtime. So you're giving them an hour and a half for the hour that they worked, and then eventually you pay them out for that, or they take it as vacation time, but it's taken as vacation time at time and a half as well, and then their leave balance builds. And leave balance is another thing that you've got to watch that can either grow to a level that people start losing leave, or when they leave the city, you pay them for the leave they have on their leave balance. So it's another unfunded liability.
I personally like the idea of having a fixed salary, I think from both standpoints. For the city, we know what we're paying for a salary for someone, and the employee also knows what their salary is, so you have something you can count on from a month-to-month basis. So I see it as being a win-win on that particular situation.
It is. So just to kind of expand a little bit on what Johnny's recommending, it would take Sergeant Hart's position when he leaves and convert it to a lieutenant, which would give a little more vertical nature to the police command and control structure. It would also, taking that dispatch requirement off of the captain to allow him to focus on the patrols more, which is really where he should be spending, he or she should be spending most of their time, and how you're actually out there conducting your operations in law enforcement across the city. So I see it as a good move for the reasons Johnny mentioned and for those same reasons, in that it creates a little more command structure within the department and kind of spreads those responsibilities out a little bit.
Is this generally what our sister cities like Alamo Heights is doing?
We can get the command structures for those cities. Johnny, are you familiar with it off the top of your head, or?
Yes, that's exactly correct. Alamo Heights does have a lieutenant slot. Lieutenant Pruitt occupies that currently. But most cities, most other agencies, are comparison cities that we use as comparison PDs, have a rank structure similar. In fact, many have lieutenants for every shift. And it can get lost in semantics, similar to how the fire department calls captains, and lieutenants, and we call sergeants, and corporals. You could have a senior officer and then a sergeant. I mean, it could get caught up in semantics, but yes. Typically, they do. Additionally, the duties therein, I think, are requisites of the position. And lastly, I'd leave you with this, unless you have other questions. The percent increase for our overall budget as of the last budget proposal was 1.12, because of that was the effective increase because of the reimbursed salary for our HIDA officer. With that $7,000 increase to the salary budget item, it goes up to, I think, 1.64, if I can recall that correctly. So it's pretty negligible for, I think, the improved administration availability, as well as the workload that we're experiencing, and how we can, another way to mitigate that.
Mr. Vanderweiler, I have one more question. In previous budget meetings over the last 2 years, 3 years, which I know you haven't been involved in, when the budget by the city's been presented to us, it's given us what it looks like at a 2% increase, at a 3% increase. So I think that when you bring the numbers back, we ought to look at that. And, you know, I'm of the belief that we don't want to go store a bunch of money up just to have it up. We have services we need to provide, we have employees we need to take care of, and if everything falls into reason, then we need to do what we can in all cases. And sometimes it's a little difficult because when you're guesstimating what some of the income is, and I think by definition, we still haven't received what our tax, our property tax is really going to be yet. Have you got that? Was that what? That's the final figure? Because generally I thought we got it later in September.
Isn't that our final tax figure? We've received it from the Bexar County Tax Assessor Collector, so yeah.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Douglas, I have one more comment on that position change, if you will, and I think this may help y'all's decision. You could also consider, when I assume the position of chief, lowering that salary to compensate for that increased salary for that lieutenant.
We're not going to get into budget negotiations with the upcoming chief at this meeting, but Councilman Paul, to your point, I will provide a breakdown for what a 2% increase looks like, as well as what a 3% increase looks like, and I think this TMRS deal is a big deal. So if we wanted to reduce that 3% because we're going to do the conversion of TMRS this year, I think that would be, I think we could sell that pretty easily. I mean, I think that would be extremely reasonable and acceptable. It does. I want to go back, if you look at your summary sheet, which is like the second or third, probably the third slide in there, just to show you where we are on the budget, because I think we've done exactly what I heard you say, which is to be fiscally responsible when we look at the budget and not build a bunch of pad and fluff into it just because we can. And if you look, you notice a lot of the numbers that we went into on the expense side were increasing. We reduced some of the incomes, but when you look at overall, the change in income is 5.68%. So the income's increased 5.68%. The expenses have only increased 2.78% on this budget, and that includes the 3% COLA, and it includes the lieutenant position. It includes the raise for Rick. So that's all inclusive. So I think we've really tried to put together a fiscally responsible budget here for you. But that brings me to the kind of the initiatives, supplementals and initiative. Again, we talked about converting, salary conversions and whatnot, but one of the things that I think we should also think about including in this budget that I've heard bantered about multiple times is to put an office at the back here for the court with a window that opened up into the interior hallway to deconflict the traffic here at the out in this little foyer. It's not unusual to come in here on court day and with the permit window running and the court window running to have 10, 15 people in that little foyer in there, and then people sitting in here waiting to get in. And they're not necessarily the same kind of clientele. So you got, contractors and homeowners and whatnot that are in here pulling permits. And then you've got people that are in here for court for a variety of reasons, and they're all mingling in this little small space out here. So I really would like to see us move forward with something. I just put $75,000 as an estimate. I think that's probably a little high, but I think it's probably a good starting number. You could have a court operating out of here on this one side with a window to the outside and a window into the court as well. So it would be very efficient. That would also allow us to get Louis out of the closet. Get Uncle Louis out of the closet over here. He sits in there with a copy machine, our code compliance officer. I mean, we really are sitting on top of each other. I had Bill Hill from Chavano Park came by on Monday of this week, just dropped in, and we went to lunch together, and he walked in, and as we were looking at my space, under his breath, he said, "You have no privacy at all in here." I said, "Yeah, I don't, man. It's like a 3-ring circus in that front office," which makes it real hard to get any momentum on any strategic initiatives. Because I'm telling you, I would say 20 times an hour I have somebody burst through that door and say, "Hey, sir." Isn't that right, Janet? Yeah. She's about 15 of them. But so anyway, I think adding some additional space back here, and then potentially, I know Ms. Scott's going to speak in a second, but we could convert this space back here pretty easily into a conference room so that when we have executive sessions, we don't have to flush everybody out of the council, and we don't have to traipse all over the community room. We could just convene in here. And then when we had staff council meetings, or staff meetings, conference meetings, we could meet in here as well, because when you sit back here at this table, you get all kinds, almost every staff meeting, at least 2, 3, 4 people coming through for this window. They come in there and they walk in and they go, and you go on by, it's right over there around the corner, you know, or sometimes we send them the other way. So I think adding a conference room in here would probably also be a good move.
Remember, we talked about that about a year ago. I think Diane came up with a plan, and then the girls have come up with a plan, and then got with the twins. Excuse me, Amy and
Our 2
Moretta.
new councilwomen,
Two new councilwomen.
alderwomen.
And so we're gonna,
I was just gonna say, Kurt, we need to meet at a further time. I've been in contact with some people concerning plans that already exist that might assist us with this situation.
Okay, that sounds great.
did you get with her?
So that,
The Tina, we did actually meet with Tina and Vicky the other day, and my concern is that $75,000 is not nearly going to cover it, because they're asking for Kevlar walls and bulletproof glass, which I want them to have. But with the type of setup you were talking about, I'm thinking more like $200,000.
well,
I'm really
like I said,
thinking
this
it's
is
going to be
literally just a
much-
wag, so.
Well, and a WAG in this building that needs a lot of work, I think we have to look really, really hard, because we're starting to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear in some ways. So we need to be really careful with the improvements that we think about doing. I see everybody is on top of each other, and I don't like it. I don't like seeing you all not having your own workspaces to where you can actually breathe and do your jobs. So I really want to look at it, but I think that this may be a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think,
Well, wait a minute. You know, and remember, it's not only out of one fund or whatever. We have don't we have something in CCPD that, I don't know.
There's court security fund that might. The court security fund might offset some of the court initiatives, not the
Grant?
council, but
Is there grants available for that? Remember?
we could research the grant.
I think we got grants for the bulletproof glass out here, didn't we? So there may be similar grants
I don't
available.
know, but the funding can come from different areas.
We did. We received grants initially for the security funding for dispatch. The security and additional ballistic glass and wall that we put in over here, I believe, was paid for out of court security, the court
We're
security
not
fund
getting that. This is
specifically.
good fodder for the upcoming work, what are we calling that these days? Oh, workshop with no action.
Okay,
Back there, because it is like make a good steam room
where are you talking about, back?
there.
Oh, back here? Yeah, we're gonna have to add air conditioning there. There'll have to be some air conditioning work done here. What's that?
Put a vent in.
a vent in
Paul's always cold, Frank Paul's always cold.
I don't know, again, there's not been,
Put Frank in there.
We had to put Leslie in a sweater.
That's right.
well, I will say that the most productive executive session we've had since I've been here took about 15 minutes in that little room because it started getting hot in a hurry. And that was the best decision that this council, in my mind, has made in the time, and the quickest.
We're calling that the cubby.
Maybe we should have them all in there, I don't know.
Not a bad idea.
In addition, I think, as I've watched Rick operate, there is nobody to fill Rick's shoes. If something were to happen to Rick Harada, or he just at one point decided he wanted to spend more time with his grandkids than he does up here, and Rick is such a dedicated employee. He's up here on the weekends. He's up here mornings, evenings, all the time. But there's no continuity over there for somebody to pick up and carry on where he's at. And I heard the cry the other night from the residents for better project management. If you guys didn't hear that, you know, with the street work that's going on. And part of that's because right now we're doing that with a consultant, and the consultants are expensive. When Jim Clements goes on a project site, it costs me $195, I think, dollars an hour. When his assistant goes out there, it costs me $95 an hour, I think. And we really, truly, you're gonna get, if you're not watching a contractor, you're probably not gonna get the product that you want. And I know that there's some debate that says these should be two different positions, but right now, what I'd like to do is find somebody that would be the Deputy Public Works guy with Rick, that can start being kind of an understudy for Rick over there, and also alleviate some of the strain and pressure off Rick. When I first got here, Rick was in the hospital with back surgery, And so I was talking to Jeanette, and I said, who's running the department when Rick's gone? Who's in charge? And she said, oh, Rick is. I said, Rick's in the hospital. You know, he just had back surgery. Oh, no, he calls the guys all the time, and he was running the Public Works Department. So, anyway, but that's just to my point, the fact that we need some additional, Rick needs some additional help over there, I think. Plus, we need somebody to be ready to step into that position, because, again, Rick would leave a huge vacancy here if he were to leave tomorrow, and we need a project manager. And those two would be somewhat deconflicted, because I'd work with the project manager role would be more my interface, and Rick would be on the public works side. And that would also free Rick up, because Rick comes to a lot of those meetings with the contractors now, and it ties him up from doing things with his guys out there and running public works. This could be offset from those street and drainage funds that we spend on consultants. So that's my pitch.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment?
JR wants to speak. Mr. JR wants to speak.
Oh, I thought you wanted to speak, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that I realize that Rick does a lot, and I remember Mr. Shands even said the same thing, that Rick's the one that knows where every line is, where our problems are, and just generally speaking, for the goodness of the community, we need to make sure that that knowledge is first transcribed and second carried on. I mean, Rick's the one that does all the, he shows the guys how to do their jobs, and we need to make sure that, not that we're rushing Rick off, but if he ever decides we're gonna go, he wants to go, we're not in a position where we're not prepared.
Yeah, I looked at Rick about 4 weeks ago and said, don't you leave me. Everybody's leaving. Fire chief, police chief, finance officer.
So Kurt, really with that last item on this one, I mean, we could really offset the salary for that person almost with the kind of project manager fees that are built into the one street project that we didn't approve the other night, that we postponed. Weren't they like $30 or $40 or $50,000 for just
Oh, no, there's more than that. So
In that
for
one?
that project on Antler, for a $1.2 million project, it's about 10% is what you're gonna pay for a project manager. So that's $120,000.
So that one project, if we authorize it, I mean, we'll basically pay for this person.
And that's just in this role. Trust me, that Rick does two persons' work already, so whatever Rick could slide over to somebody else's plate, and then also not take so much of his time on weekends and evenings and stuff like that would be, that'd be huge. So, okay. But no, you're exactly right, Alderman. These are other things that I would like to bring forward to the next workshop. We need a code compliance vehicle. Louis' Ford Explorer out there is on its last leg. The last time we replaced it with it was a worn out Ford Explorer from police. They got finished with it and they turned it over. I think it was from your Haida guy, right? And so he turned it over to Louis. So it was done then. And how long has code compliance had that vehicle, Johnny?
Oh, long before I got here. How long?
5 years.
Starting
So it was too old for the police to use 5 years ago, and our code compliance officer's been driving it around. And he spends a lot of time in that vehicle running around our city, so I'd like to look at that. And then I think we waste a lot of effort that we could avoid if we automated our court function and our permitting function. So I'd really like to further research automating that. There'll be an upfront expense, but that comp time that gets built up would probably be somewhat alleviated by this as well.
Kurt, if you're thinking about automation, I haven't had a chance to research it because I just went to the program on Tuesday, but I listened to a code compliance presentation by the trainer for San Antonio, and they have an app, and I don't know if it's a proprietary San Antonio code compliance app or something we can get, where citizens can upload pictures and text regarding code compliance violations they see, and it automatically schedules on their code compliance officer's schedule. So, I mean, San Antonio is huge, of course, and they've got multiple officers.
And they got lots of officers.
And they've got lots of officers, but it automatically schedules them onto the code compliance officer's schedule so that those issues don't get missed. But what I liked was the person that's walking their dog with their cell phone in their hand can take a picture, write the information about the property and upload it, and automatically it would be on Louis's task list of things to check on. Because that was the complaint that I know Brother Dooling has had, is that he's walking around and seeing things, but Louis driving around may not see the same things because he's driving, he's not walking. So your attention is in
No,
different
that's
places.
exactly right. That, the neighbors, the residents are gonna be much better at catching everything. And, you know, there's, how many code compliance violations are there a day in a city? Somebody parking on the grass, you know?
I think that's a fantastic idea, but I'll
Yeah.
tell you what, can you imagine that around here? Louis, we'd need a terabyte of memory.
We might
Or
need to hire
more.
another code compliance officer just for that one resident you mentioned.
Mr. Mayor, can I follow up on that?
All I'm saying, in case there's somebody out there watching, is that our residents are so vigilant and able to catch these violators.
Can I follow up on Ms. McLean's comment?
Sure.
Okay. So that app is actually called City Flag. It's one of my friends is the creator, and I was planning on setting up a meeting with Mr. Vanderwall and presenting it to council, but it really is an amazing app. It geotags the picture, so if you take a picture, it shows the exact coordinates of where it was taken, and it populates all kinds of reports for the code compliance officer. So in a sense, it actually makes their job a little bit easier. The actual technology behind the software is where the value's at. And I say value because there is a cost associated with it, as well as yearly licensing fees. They just won the contract with San Antonio, so they're a startup. But I'm hopeful to leverage my relationship with him and use Castle Hills as a poster child, because the benefit would be easy to measure here.
I salute Mr. Trevino on that, because I came from a company that had something similar called Salesforce.com. And we all said it'd never work. This company spent $1 billion, $1 billion putting it in. And now I don't see how a company or any organization lives without it. It sure does. It gets rid of the engineers, which you don't need. And
Thanks, Mayor. Feeling the
Sure.
love.
Mr.
I
City
said
Manager,
that
I
on
just wanted to
purpose.
clarify
But all
one
it
thing.
does is it puts a platform in order to communicate, and there's, one platform czar, if you will, that allows that communication to the different bodies and where it needs to go. The customer can get involved, like, meaning the resident, like that, it goes to Louis, and then what ends up happening is the right people get copied on this, rather than, someone coming in and saying, like the other night during the council meeting, and, whoa, man, we didn't know that was going on, and, the whole works. Go ahead.
Because I'm assuming we're recorded, I just wanted to clarify that the code compliance vehicle was purchased out of crime control. Just for the record. And
Really?
potentially we could advocate, to other cities for that software if we welcomed it and liked it.
JR, I'm glad you know the person, because I thought it sounded amazing. 2 points where we might be able to have a revenue stream with code compliance. In following San Antonio's lead, we're small enough that we could make this work. It would take some ordinances, but they have an absentee property owner registry, to where if you have a property you're renting and you don't live here, and they get 2 code compliance violations in a year, then they have to pay a fee and belong to a registry and have a local property agent that can take care of the property. If they go for 2 or 3 years, I can't remember the time period, without any violations, then they can fall off of it and start the whole process over again. But if we have properties like that, or vacant properties, they've got a couple of different ways that they have registries to where it's easier for code compliance to take care of the violations.
Amy, will you put that on your calendar to visit with the city manager again? And like I said, any kind of revenue stream, and that's great. And plus, not only that, it would also, we've got 2 situations here in town I think we all know about that. Wow, that's all I got to say. And anyway, thank you.
So I'm hearing a big vote for automation, and Louis used automated software at Balcones Heights. Our building inspector on the permit side uses automated software with his other cities. He says it's fantastic. It's so simple, it would save Janet and Kit